An electric current passed through the girl's entire body. She lowered her head, and in general, she was only held up by the straps holding her to the wooden chair. Despite the trickles of blood running down the corners of her mouth, she whispered to Noah through unbearable pain that she could no longer hold on. Hot tears flowed from Scarlett's eyes, mixing with blood. And in her last words, she smiled and asked for forgiveness. Noah, sitting opposite him on the exact same torture chair, screamed terribly, holding out his hand. He thought that this was just a realistic game. He told himself that he would soon get out of it. Soon he too gave in, whispering to Scarlett that this was the end for him too. Another weak voice was heard, a man covered in blood, insisting that Noah must survive. There were 6 of them, unsuccessful players who thought they could get away with it. This torture took the last crumbs of life, and the dark brick walls were illuminated by ominous lamps on the ceiling. Noah began to struggle, scream, and sob, begging not to leave him here. This place became the guy's new reality, and there was no longer any possibility of escaping. Realizing this with every cell of his being, Noah leaned forward and tensed, screaming hysterically. Reverse Planet is a game that has taken first place worldwide in the virtual reality genre. With concepts such as change gates, supernatural abilities, and invasion wars, it has earned high praise from players. Here you could make any dream come true, improve yourself to the ideal, do something that few would dare to do in reality. Noah joined the game on a friend's recommendation, but it turned out that he simply found himself locked in this world. In a world where a reverse planet appeared out of nowhere and became a new reality for players. Meanwhile, figures in overalls and protective masks entered the room. One of them, holding a tablet in his hands, greeted test subject number 62. The man stopped in front of the unfortunate man, proudly declaring that he was one step closer to becoming a transcendent of the Transcendence Project. This project is truly a crazy thing, in which thousands of people took part in order to create Transcendental. The kidnapped victims were used as laboratory animals, tortured with electric shocks, forced drug injections, body modification, inhumane experiments. The scientists surrounded the player. One of them ordered another to burn the corpse and lock number 62 in with the rest of the survivors. Noah, hearing all this, felt incredible rage inside himself, clenching his fists with force. The blood, which had not yet had time to dry, flowed down his lips again. The guy clenched his teeth so hard he would never forgive these people. And if this is Noah's current reality, then he must survive to exact revenge. After a while, the silence of the corridors was deafened by an alarm, announcing that the test subjects had escaped, so the staff should arm themselves and be ready. The prisoners who actually managed to escape from the electric cages fled headlong. Some armed themselves with the first thing that came to hand. Noah shouted that the exit was at the end of the corridor. He was already anticipating his imminent freedom. But unfortunately, the path of the test subjects was blocked by a strong red-haired man who seemed delighted that the people had actually made it here. The guard screamed and clenched his fist, shouting defiantly that it was time for them to die now. He began to stretch his arms, slowly approaching the captives, who all swore loudly at once. Noah's partner, who was holding the bloody axe, managed to call upon his abilities and asked his friend to cover the others from behind while they detained the guard. He chuckled when he heard what the subject was saying, then called everyone present fools whom he would finish off with one blow. It seemed like only a few seconds had passed before the man let out a piercing scream as Noah, out of nowhere, grabbed him from behind. The guard's face slowly turned red. Blood started to flow from his nose, and his breathing suddenly caught in his throat. When Noah threw the almost lifeless body to the ground, he discovered with horror that all his companions were dead. Tears started flowing from my eyes once again. This nightmare was repeating itself again and again. The surrounding environment changed dramatically, and the guy felt as if he had dived headfirst into a viscous swamp. Ominous figures separated from the bodies of the captives. They writhed, moaned, and howled, begging Noah to avenge them and kill them all. Time flew by. Years passed after the escape from the laboratory. Noah continued to fight against the influx of armed guards. To avenge those the boy loved, he killed again and again, setting himself the goal of destroying them all. Now he was no longer the one chained to the electric chair. Noah had matured, his entire body covered in scars from battles. The guard who tried to escape immediately screamed, realizing that these were the last seconds of his life. Noah plunged the knife into his neck with one precise movement, his hand not trembling for a second. The worst thing was that this was a revenge that had no end because the ghosts of the past did not detach themselves from the living comrade, asking for more and more revenge. The guy was gasping for breath, desperately wondering how much longer he had to live like this. Was he seriously planning to continue in the same spirit until his death? Suddenly, Noah froze, looking at the system screen that had appeared so suddenly after a long time. The man, who had long since lost hope, had his eyes widened in amazement as he was offered a special task to correct his mistakes. The task was to eliminate the curator of the Transcendence Project, and in return they promised to give them the opportunity to return to their home world. Noah rushed to the chief's office, killing several guards on the way, and taking the leader of this project by surprise, he sat on his knees at his desk, begging for mercy. The project curator was amazed that this man came to kill because he had everything and could simply enjoy the fame. In response, Noah's partner, Project 81 test subject Joshua, slowly walked up to the frightened man and grabbed him by the collar of his expensive jacket. The guy laughed evilly, asking if the curator really didn't know what he was asking about. The man, with a sharp movement, threw the stranger's hand away from himself and spat out with disgust that the 81-year-old subject should shut up because he would not talk to people like him. Joshua grimaced but walked away while the curator turned to Noah, addressing him. Subject, number 61, who has matured since he first arrived here and acquired new scars on his handsome face. The bloodied interlocutor begged him to come to his senses because the guy was a true superhuman, surpassing human boundaries with his body, the ultimate success of the Transcendence Project. Before the curator could assure him that he would fulfill any wish of Noah, who was on a completely different level, the player hit the man, saying that he did not need it. He roared like a wild animal and began to insult the guy, threatening that his actions would have consequences. The League of Enterprises never leaves dogs that come to snap unpunished. The curator shouted that Noah's friends, his family, everyone associated with him, will answer for Noah's actions. But the man didn't even have time to finish his sentence before he was cut off mid-sentence with one sharp movement. In 1 second, Noah took the life of the curator, cutting off his head like a seasoned butcher. Joshua winced even more as blood splashed onto him. It happened so suddenly that he didn't have time to move away. He screamed hysterically that he was now covered in blood, not understanding why they had to kill the man if they still had questions for him. His interlocutor was staring at the system screen, which announced that the special task had been completed, the promised reward was ready, and now the player had a chance to return to his world. With trembling hands, the guy reached for the confirmation button. He just needed to press it, and finally, he could leave the whole nightmare behind. But the ghosts of the past were not going to let go of their surviving comrade. They clung to him, emerging from the lake of the dead, ordering him to take revenge. His hands, which had been covered in blood for so many years, fell powerlessly. Noah was tired. He didn't understand. Was what he had done not enough? A million thoughts in his head were interrupted by Joshua, who put his hand on his comrade's shoulder and called out to him. Noah muttered that he wanted to return to his home, but the blonde angrily shouted that this was nonsense because he had already told his friend that he had been here from the very beginning. As if enchanted, Noah simply asked if Joshua would tell the others and confidently pressed the yes button on the panel. Noah, wearing funny pajamas, opened his eyes abruptly in his bed, lying on a soft pillow. He got scared and sat up abruptly in bed, not understanding where he was. Was he really in his room? Memories came flooding back. Noah wondered if he was really back and what time it was. His phone showed the same date when he was drawn into the game. Noah ran to the bathroom to examine himself, and indeed, the scars, the muscles, everything was gone, as if it had all been just a dream. His face was distorted with rage, and his eyes were completely black with yellow pupils. I remembered how he could knock the spirit out of his enemies with just a cold weapon. How the guards' blood flowed from their open wounds, which the player tirelessly inflicted. But the most important thing is the bloodless face of Scarlet, who whispered that she did not want to die. The curator, who, in a fit of madness, screamed that all friends, families, everyone connected to Noah would answer for his actions. But how could all this be a dream because the sensations and memories of the last 10 years spent on the other side were too vivid? They were real. The guy returned to the room where his mobile phone was ringing off the hook on the table. Noah was surprised to see a very familiar name on the screen, but he couldn't remember it in his sleep. Having accepted the call, the guy had to move the phone away from his ear as the girl hysterically asked why he hadn't contacted her and whether her friend had forgotten about the meeting. Noah asked again. And she, interrupting him, shouted that she would send the location so that they could meet that evening. The guy wanted to ask something else, but his interlocutor had already hung up. But the voice was still familiar. Indeed, it was his closest friend who introduced him to the game. Could she really have known and planned everything? If Noah's memory serves him correctly, then this is unlikely, and before drawing conclusions, he needs to meet with Sandra. Having changed his clothes, the guy nevertheless left the house in the evening and went to the appointed place. Sandra stood up from the table and began waving her hand, loudly calling Noah's name. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. He sat down carefully at the table, and his interlocutor reminded him that they had not seen each other since finishing school. Noah refused alcohol because if he drank in such a state, it was unknown what he could do. Sandra was surprised that her friend refused to drink. Soon the waiter brought meat and vegetables, which the friends placed in the roasting pan. Sandra asked Noah, who was munching on food, if he had played Reverse Planet, since he had said that he had tried to complete the training. He replied that he had created a character, and the girl was incredibly surprised by this. She added that, judging by this speed, Noah wasn't playing at all, and it was the guy's turn to be surprised. He slammed the table in anger, because considering he had spent 10 years in the game because of Sandra, he couldn't hold back. She sniffled resentfully, saying that she had been expecting her friend to appear on her streams since he was a Colosseum ranker, and even demonstrating half that physical strength on her small stream would have caused a huge sensation. Looking at his offended friend, Noah raised an eyebrow, remembering that she had mentioned this, and, apparently, that was why she had begged him to play together. This calmed the guy down a little. He realized that he had indeed returned home, and Sandra reminded him that he had promised to attend the stream. Overcoming all his fears, Noah nevertheless turned on the computer that same night and grabbed the mouse with a trembling hand. He decided to find out more about the game Reverse Planet, who the developer was and where their headquarters were located. They were in Silicon Valley, and at first the guy decided that he would visit the headquarters, but in the end he thought this idea was stupid because if he told them that he ended up in another world because of the game, they would think he was crazy. And if these people have something to do with that nightmare, then it's even more dangerous to stir up the past. Noah dropped his head into his hands. He didn't know what he was doing. He should just be glad to get out of this hell. Why bother checking anything at all? The guy glanced at the books lying on the table. He had to forget about everything. He had returned to his home world. The next day, while walking through the streets, someone caught up with Noah, throwing an arm over his shoulder. Some people from his past joyfully greeted their friend. The guy tried to live like an ordinary person, living his ordinary life. He even decided to change something and went to courses to study and was just studying in the library. But suddenly he felt drops of blood running down his clothes, and the ghosts from the game asked if he was sure of what he was doing. When Noah was asked if this was real, the former player turned around abruptly. There was no one behind him. Everyone was quietly studying, and a librarian was receiving visitors at the book checkout counter. Something started to go wrong, and the whole place turned into a red-drenched space, with ghosts of the past writhing in their chairs instead of patrons harping on revenge. Seeing how quickly Noah took off, the others looked askance at his strange behavior. The guy immediately broke away and ran into the corridor, leaning against the wall. He covered his face with his hand. There was not enough air, but it became worse when the ghost's hand lay on his shoulder. Deciding it was time to end this, Noah grabbed the hand, intending to deal with the ghost. The young man screamed in fear as someone grabbed him by the wrist with the intention of throwing him to the floor. Noah, who still saw the ghost, remembered how he once easily plunged daggers into others' throats. And now he had to do the same, all for the sake of revenge for his friends. A fist with an invisible knife appeared at his shoulder, and the boy asked in confusion what Noah was doing. As if waking up from a nightmare, he trembled and let go of the guy, then apologized, saying that he had been scared. He looked at his shaking hand, breathing heavily. His pursuer muttered that Noah had been acting strange lately. The desire to study disappeared, and the unfortunate former player went out into the street. He bought a soda from the vending machine and fell tiredly onto the bench nearby, hanging his head. The ghosts did not miss the opportunity to address their savior, emerging from the ground and whispering his name. The guy mumbled that he didn't want to, but they hugged him, wrapping their arms around his legs, and asked him to come back, not to forget them, and to take revenge. Just as Noah was about to scream in impotent rage, Sandra jumped out in front of him, greeting her friend. The girl immediately noticed her friend's strange appearance, emphasizing that he looked as if he had met a ghost and was generally tired. Forcing a smile, Noah muttered that everything was fine, as long as they left him alone. Sandra shrugged and winked at Noah, exclaiming that if anything happened, he could tell his older sister everything. As soon as the girl turned around, the ghosts that had hidden earlier began to grab the guy by the legs and arms again. Noah himself had brought them along with him. Once at home, he approached the device with which he could immerse himself in the game, a large apparatus in the form of a capsule. If the ghosts don't rest until Noah grants their wishes, this side will be no different from the other. The guy made a decision. He climbed into the capsule and closed the transparent door behind him. Noah was determined to go back and put an end to everyone's suffering. The guy blinked, and the next moment heard the welcoming words from Reverse Planet and found himself in an ascetic room, dressed in a white jumpsuit. Noah looked at himself in the mirror. He found himself in the lobby of the research room, but before he couldn't get into the laboratory in that world. Now that the player has finally decided to return to this hell, will there be any other conditions? The system asked if the user wanted to keep the character's appearance. Noah agreed. First, he will go through the tutorial and get familiar with the settings. The system has just set the combat correction to 0% and is performing factory settings. It also asks the user to choose his first basic ability, which can be changed at any time. Reverse Planet is set up in such a way that after selecting a primary ability, the user can enhance their character with elements. The customization of core abilities and elements is called a build. In the professional league, there is a huge variety of elements. Professional builders have studied builds more thoroughly. This is why in his past life, Na was able to obtain the title of metahuman. When the player selected his primary ability, a mechanical voice called out to him from the speakers, identifying him as test subject number 48. The voice stated that the player had awakened during the last volume, and a week had passed since they last saw each other. Noah remembered the terrifying images of the experiments and wondered if the game would show the process that occurs before awakening. The voice urged the player to begin the first test immediately and asked him to go inside a room filled with white light. Noah obediently followed the order and found himself in a huge snow-white barn. The guy almost screamed in surprise when he saw a real monster in front of him, Etinel. It is a true killing machine, created to stop those who awakened and went berserk during the Transcendence Project, which killed many test subjects. Noah was given the task of destroying Etinel, but last time his friends died before the user's eyes. Those who could begged for help, but the rest lay unconscious while Etinel strangled his next victim. At this time, the robot standing in the middle of the room suddenly came to life. The light on its head turned straight towards the one who entered. The target was fixed, and Etinel rushed towards the man with all his mechanical strength. Noah didn't even flinch and began to flex his fingers, acting as if a nice dog was running towards him. There was less than a moment left before the robot would attack. When the player's eyes turned into a black abyss with a sun inside, he screamed that researchers always commit inhumane acts. Etinel was very close, and his mechanical hand hit Noah with force, but he managed to dodge. The robot danced in the air, its design causing more and more parts to separate from its body every minute, ready to attack. But his opponent was not inferior in human strength to technology, and skillfully jumped in different directions. Noah ran up and used his ability to push Etinel, and although the first version already irritated the guy with its abilities, the robot was still weak against the player. The subsequent impact shattered Noah Etinel, scattering parts throughout the barn. The system declared the test complete and labeled subject number 48 as amazing. Noah was silent, then threw the torn-off robot part aside, and it bounced back with the sound of an empty can. The player's talent far exceeded the capabilities of an ordinary test subject, and he completed training task 01 to destroy Etinel. A few seconds later, the system announced the start of the next test. The alarm started screaming loudly. No one understood what was happening. Probably the culprits were people from the government. A female voice was heard. Someone had burst into the wheelhouse and was checking the microphone. Noah heard the voices addressing the oppressed victims trapped in the lab, urging them to do whatever it took to free themselves. A few moments later, an explosion rang out, narrowly missing the player, and flames and smoke filled the barn. The guy had to get out of there first. He rushed out of the room, and behind him he could hear more explosions and the screams of the staff. Running around the corner, rightly calculating that the corridors were in incredible disarray, Noah came across a wounded man. He wouldn't have noticed the figure huddled on the floor, but something made him stop. He saw the logo of the Dimension Control Bureau on the fighter's uniform. They were not his enemies. The bloodied man believed that Noah was one of the victims who wanted to escape. Finally, he decided to help the guy, and with weakened hands he took a tablet out of his pocket, pressing a button there. A door opened in front of Noah, revealing all sorts of weapons hanging on the wall, all of which he was offered to take for himself. The man held out a walkie-talkie-like device, whispering that he would use it to find the player outside the bureau, then suddenly fell silent, his hand holding the thing out to the ground. Noah shook his head, leaning over the fighter and examining what was offered to him. He tried his best to remember that he was inside a game, that this was just a step in the story's development, but he didn't see that there was a robot lurking around the corner. His hand automatically reached for the cold weapon. Apparently, he had used it before. At that moment, those same ghosts were drawn to Noah again, and he felt incredible disgust. At this time, professional gaming streamer Nicole was streaming. She rolled her eyes, saying she never thought she'd be playing the country's favorite game, Reverse Planet, and her hipster pride was hurt. When commentators began to write that the girl herself chose this game, Nicole shook her fist at the camera, shouting that it was the viewers who chose this punishment. Turning around radiantly, she said with a smile that she never broke the promise she made to her viewers, to which she received a number of comments with opposing opinions. She laughed and danced victoriously, declaring that as punishment for not being able to finish the game, she would dominate this one. She left the character's appearance and was just about to choose a really cool ability. The combat correction amounted to 50%. This is a system that assists with stance, movement, and ability use in combat. The higher the percentage, the more assistance the player receives. Nicole scratched her chin thoughtfully, seeing that the passage would be without any assists. According to her research, the overall percentage of users who opted out of the assist was 0. Nicole has been training using indie games, so she's confident in the physical demands, but without some adjustments, it'll be like trying to control a third arm that suddenly appeared. She winked at the camera, asking if everyone wanted there to be no combat correction, and then saw that there was a large reward for this. All sensible thoughts replaced by dreams of money, Nicole shouted that real streamers always try at least once, causing laughter from the commentators. Jumping up and clapping her hands, the girl shouted that she would use 0 combat correction until she completed all the training. But everything turned out not to be as rosy as the streamer had dreamed. She was exhausted after just half an hour. Etinel killed her within 2 minutes, and she had to fight him without even getting an explanation. Spectators watched as the robot beat the player and discussed how it was impossible to defeat him. With 0 correction. A system window appeared in front of the girl, and she thought that since she had a radio and a weapon, she could simply run away. The second training task was to escape from the research center, and an automatic selection of 4 participants was launched. Nicole was delighted, and to the indignation of the audience, began to select participants to discuss further actions with them. The system announced to the discouraged player that manual selection of participants had failed, and automatic selection had been launched, including those people who were currently performing the task. The audience laughed at Nicole's correct guess. She too will work with people who have zero correction. The streamer began tapping on the system screen, which announced that the group selection was complete and the player was joining the Escape from the Research Center mission. Nicole realized that her situation was now completely hopeless and she could only smile stupidly. She felt especially bad at the moment when the game transported her to a real hell. There were corpses of people and fragments of robots lying on the ground. The chat on her stream realized that the player who did all this was a real machine, because even pros can't get through training without combat correction. And the worst thing was that this man defeated everyone without weapons. Nicole decided that she would be forced to be the main source of damage on the team, and therefore it was necessary to urgently find this player. Noah reached the end of the corridor holding a bloody knife in his hands. Through the sound of dripping drops of blood, someone's footsteps were heard, and the guide turned his head sharply. Nicole walked casually to the edge of the turn and peered out, about to say something. The smiling girl had no idea that her search would end so sadly. Noah flew up to the stranger in 2 counts and put a bloody dagger to her forehead. The tip of the knife moved lower. Nicole only opened her mouth in amazement, trying to say something. She darted around the corner, apologizing. But the strange madman also apologized, saying that he had made a mistake. Seeing that the clothes of this strange test subject were stained with blood, Nicole realized that he was the one she was looking for. Meanwhile, Noah said goodbye to her and turned to leave, but the streamer asked if she could go with him since they were on the same team. Without waiting for an answer, the girl ran up to Noah, introduced herself, and began to chirp that she was still broadcasting and transmitting what was happening. Just as he was talking about the privacy protection mode, which would cover the guy's face, he suddenly stopped. Nicole was taken aback, not understanding what had happened and why they weren't moving on, assuming that their new acquaintance was angry. But everything turned out to be much worse. Security appeared in front of them and was given the order to destroy the test subjects. Without hesitation, the men immediately opened fire, aiming directly at the fugitives. Nicole ducked down, covering herself with her hands and squealing desperately. She didn't understand why the training was so difficult. Something truly strange was happening. Realizing that the game was not over, the streamer turned around. Her team member seemed to flow in the air, deflecting bullets with his hands and feet. He moved quickly and gracefully, chains attached to his hands to assist the player. Moreover, after a few seconds, it became clear that these bullets were returning back and hitting the guards. The stream chat exploded with comments, everyone wondering who this person was, and Nicole hid behind the robot debris, muttering that although she was unfamiliar with the reverse planet law, it all seemed like nonsense. The guy's eyes turned black again. Everyone was guessing what kind of ability he was using. Finally, someone wrote that the main ability that changes the color of the eyes and increases physical abilities is the absolute being. Even though the commentators said that the one who chose such an ability was a real scumbag, the man in front of them still looked incredibly cool. The absolute being is one of the key pillars of the game's countless possibilities. It significantly increases physical stats and skill resistance, but does not allow the ability to be used independently. Due to these penalties, users consider the skill completely useless. Nicole was surprised because it was strange. The inability to use abilities in a game where the abilities themselves play a key role. It's definitely hard to use abilities in combat without assists. Maybe I should just give up and go with physical stats, Nicole thought, when someone wrote in chat that a physical effect could be useful in combat even without combat correction. But this guy still does the impossible, and he's only on level 1. Who was he, if it was so easy to deal with opponents using the means at hand? Already several dozen guards who came to kill the fugitives have died themselves. Having dealt with the guards, Noah, as if enchanted, walked forward, rattling his chains. Hearing strange sounds, he suddenly raised his scythe and saw someone's eyes in its reflection. The ghosts surrounded the guy again, whispering that this was not enough. He needed to be more cruel in his revenge. Noah froze, unable to remove the sticky, clinging hands of the voices of the past from himself. He seemed not to notice that a new guard had appeared nearby and was already aiming at him. Nicole appeared from behind a mountain of robot remains and jumped out, warning the guy. While he stood motionless, the agile streamer began shooting at the enemy. He didn't even try to counterattack, but only awkwardly dodged the bullets. Nicole somehow managed to slide across the floor right to the guard's feet. Finding herself extremely close to the tall figure, Nicole fired and hit the enemy right in the head. Lying on the ground, she blew importantly into the barrel of the pistol, which caused delight among the commentators. The girl stood up and noticed Noah standing nearby. She smiled widely, waving the gun, exclaiming that she had helped her partner. But instead of an unfamiliar girl, the guy suddenly saw the face of his old friend. Once upon a time, this little girl joined the players, filling their days with joy. She also disappeared, drowning in rivers of blood as the ghosts continued to surround Noah. He shook his head and came back to the present after the girl called him Mr. Almighty. She kept asking if the player was angry because she just wanted to help a little. Noah smiled and shook his head, saying that Nicole really helped. After which, the commenters began to speculate about whether the man was attractive, since they couldn't see him due to privacy settings. Nicole cried out, asking if she could continue training with Noah, and he agreed. The couple walked further down the corridor, and only then did Noah say his name, which surprised the girl. She asked if she could ask a question about choosing absolute being as the first main ability. He briefly answered that it was so. He really chose being. Blushing, Nicole decided to ask how the guy dodged bullets without abilities. Was there really some kind of deception? Noah was just about to answer when he stopped abruptly again, looking into the distance. The player quietly said that there were 2 itinels about 20 meters ahead. The streamer was puzzled because Noah doesn't have detection abilities, but he can still determine how far away the enemies are and how many of them there are. However, he said that robots are not so scary, and the couple moved on. Around the corner, they were indeed met by the itinels, and Noah muttered thoughtfully that he probably really enjoyed playing Colosseum back in the day. The itinels did not stand on ceremony with the man, and immediately attacked him. But Noah did not stand still either. He turned around and lunged with his leg, damaging the robots. Having sealed one into the wall, he went to attack the second, talking along the way about the time when he became interested in games. The guy raised his fist, and his eyes immediately darkened. He had previously been a ranker in games. These words were followed by a blow of such force that it completely destroyed Etinel. Nicole was taken aback once again, wondering if being a ranker in the Colosseum really counted as being elite. A message appeared in the chat about a professional gamer named Steve, who was also a ranker, which surprised Nicole immensely. After all, Steve was the biggest player on the professional scene of this game. The streamer was pulled out of her thoughts by Noah's calm voice, calling the girl to follow him. The time had come for the final task. An old friend, Noah, appeared before the players. The laboratory's head of security, the training boss, exclaimed that the players probably didn't know that this place would become their grave. He added that the subjects would soon meet their dead comrades to further intimidate them. Noah froze in shock, his eyes returning to their original shape. Terrible memories came flooding back with renewed vigor, and ghosts began to emerge behind the head of security. Their faces became distorted, became more and more dangerous and ugly. They ordered to kill. The vision ended. The red-haired man howled and rushed straight towards the players. Nicole, without saying a word, crouched down to get a better grip on the rifle and began shooting. But the bullets weren't scary to the man. He had particle barriers, which amazed Nicole, who thought they only existed for the awakened. The girl got scared and ran around the corner, shouting to Noah that she would help him by shooting from here. The guy was left alone with the head of security, but he was not going to give up. And even though it was a game, he had to take revenge, and so he began to break through the guard's defense. After some time, an explosion was heard, and a thick cloud of smoke formed at the site of the struggle. Nicole, trying to grasp the sequence of the battle, froze because she did not understand what was happening. A few moments later, the entire stream saw the security chief's disgrace. He was slammed into the wall with full force. The man cursed and pushed off the wall, threatening to tear the guy to shreds. He, trying to catch the fugitive, hit the floor with all his might, but Noah managed to jump away. The guard roared, using his ability to cover his body in iron. At that moment, his palm turned into a real drill, which could deal with the fugitive in a matter of seconds. The head of security shouted angrily as he used a drill to destroy the walls. He ran towards the guy, but he ran away deceptively, giving his enemy hope. Finally, Noah decided that the moment had come and clenched his hand into a fist, waiting for the enemy to slow down for a second. Then he pulled his hand back and hit his opponent with all his might, delivering a crushing blow. The guard didn't even seem to realize the moment when a strange fist flew into his face, hitting him with stunning force, knocking his mask off his face. The man fell to one knee and looked up in pain, covering his face with his hand. Immediately, the ghost's tenacious fingers reached out to Noah's feet, whispering that he shouldn't put away his iron skill. He began to flex his fist, assessing the condition of the chief of security, but the figures behind him screamed for death, ordered him to kill and avenge them. The man wiped the black blood from his face. He could only guess how the subject could have become so powerful. He received the answer to his question immediately. Noah pierced the guard with his gaze, saying that he became this way thanks to him. Nicole froze with the machine gun in her hand, watching as the floor turned crimson with blood. It was not a pleasant sight. Her teammate had defeated the laboratory's head of security. However, the girl shrugged her shoulders and was glad that they had defeated the training boss. All that remained was to get out of here. Noah, even now, continued to take out his anger on the lifeless body of the guard, beating him into the floor. Only when the girl called out to him did the player remove his bloody fist from the place where his opponent's face had recently been. Now his body could be taken away by ghosts to do whatever they wanted to do while they were alive. Noah simply left a sacrifice for them and followed Nicole without looking back. The system announced that the task had been completed, the player's level had been increased, and they had also received 1 skill point. Once the users were outside, Nicole, stretching, asked Noah if he was going to continue with the main task today. He shook his head. The girl clapped her hands and asked her new acquaintance to wait a little. Nicole then said goodbye to the viewers, announcing that the NoAssist tutorial was now complete and ending the stream, then thanking Noah for waiting. With her hands folded in a prayer gesture, the girl looked at Noah with puppy dog eyes, asking him to be a frequent guest on her streams. He was surprised when he was told that there was participation in the main quests as well as in PvP. Nicole assured that she would try to ensure that the streams would take place according to Noah's schedule and would also provide a decent salary for participation. The guy thought about it, but still refused and only agreed that Nicole would add him as a friend. The girl bowed, saying that it was fun to play with him, then left the reverse planet. Noah was left alone on the street, muttering thoughtfully that the training was complete. But something went wrong. For some reason, he didn't return to the other side. What Noah didn't know was that they were already preparing revelations about him online. A video was uploaded in which the author promised to explain why Noah was a hacker. Now millions of people were watching his game and even donating large sums. It was a restless early morning at Planet Earth's Korean branch. The entire office was thrown into chaos by one player, an unprecedented event in the company's history. On the agenda, among the developers, was a thorough review of the video of the moment of the user's battle with the game character. Even after re-watching it, it was incredible to see that guy, with no upgrades, weapons, or stat adjustments, take down the head of security with his bare hands. The online community had already assumed the player was using cheats, and users pressured management for an explanation, but employees were absolutely certain there was no fraud. Experts checked everything, even the logs from the moment the character was created, and no signs of hacking or the introduction of external programs were found. Over the years, the developers have seen countless hackers, some of whom have walked through walls. Or they created weird invisibility mods that broke and didn't work as they should. But the creators had never seen a player perform such actions and move in such a way. The developer slammed his hands on the table, exclaiming that even if the game were hacked, it would be impossible to have such precision. However, there could be a very small chance that this is some new hack that the game creators haven't discovered. One of the developers clasped his hands and looked seriously at his colleagues, declaring that a proper check needed to be carried out. After Noah finished his session of Reverse Planet, he met Sandra again at the cafe. He looked at his friend in bewilderment when she told him that the online community had been turned upside down because of him. Sandra's eyes were shining. She was really excited about this because it was complete chaos. People started their own challenges following the steps Noah took. Everyone failed, and now insists it's cheating. Sandra herself was shocked when she first saw the video on Nicole's stream. When her friend asked her how she recognized him, the girl replied that he told her his name. She already knew that Noah was good, but she couldn't imagine that he had reached such a level. Then Noah realized why those people had contacted him and told Sandra everything. The girl almost flipped the table over, screaming that it was simply unbelievable that the Korean branch of the developers had contacted the guy. Sandra jumped up from the table, hysterically asking if the game creators wanted to find out if Noah had used the hack. The guy took a sip of coffee, adding that he received a message about the news through a streamer. Sandra was thrilled because the gaming company had openly decided to check a player for cheating, which would attract a lot of attention. It's a Korean branch, but in any case, it's Noah's only chance to directly communicate with the developers, and he might get hints about another world. The player told his friend that he would think about it, and Sandra cried out joyfully that her friend had made a good choice. If Noah wanted to continue being remembered, it would be better to deny the accusations, but the guy replied that he didn't care. People wouldn't recognize him anyway because of the mask on the stream. But even with his different appearance, the guy's fighting style is still too unique. Now, when even professionals hide their identities, their fighting habits give them away immediately. Strange videos from restless viewers, allegedly exposing the player, have already been circulating online. Upon learning this, Noah could only shake his head, noting that people were truly possessed. Sandra still tried to persuade her friend, because Nicole could suffer because of this. Noah was surprised, since he had nothing to do with the girl. But his friend rightly noted that as soon as drama starts, people target anyone even remotely connected to the subject of discussion. At first, viewers will be focused only on Noah, but they will likely also target Nicole. The guy was deep in thought, slowly stirring the coffee in his glass with a straw. Finally, he responded to Nicole, writing that he agreed to meet with company representatives. The streamer was delighted because with this level of excitement, the viewer count would skyrocket. In the evening, the girl sat down at the computer with anticipation of something grand. On her page, the girl wrote that there would soon be a stream with a cheat check. 4 days later, Noah found himself in the reverse planet with a heavy heart. Nicole ran out to meet him. She chatted awkwardly and apologized profusely, asking if the guy was having a hard time because of all the circumstances. The guy asked if the streamer suspected him of cheating, but the girl didn't even think about it because she saw what Noah did that day. What's more important, what the girl didn't say out loud. The guy's eyes looked like a crazy killer. It's unlikely that a cheater could look like that. Nicole chuckled nervously, adding that it really was just instinct. The girl asked if they could start the stream and held up a small camera. Having turned it on, the streamer immediately greeted the audience, announcing the start of recording. 10,000 viewers gathered at the start of the stream to find out the details of the mysterious circumstances of Noah's victory. Nicole noticed that there was a lot of excitement and introduced the player, who greeted her modestly, receiving both a storm of discontent and many neutral messages in the comments. Seeing this, Nicole frowned and ordered her viewers to calm down. Otherwise, she would simply close the chat. Before starting the main test, the streamer asked Noah what he thought about the whole situation. The guy shook his head, saying he simply found it ridiculous that something like that would cause controversy. Nicole exclaimed that it was too amazing to call the battle something like that. The girl invited a special guest for today's test, and indeed, at that very second, a man appeared on the playing field. A stranger in a white shirt and holding a tablet introduced himself as Michael, the manager of Task Force 1 at Planet Earth in Korea. Users noticed the GM title above his head. Noah thought that the task force manager might definitely know something, and after checking, he needed to ask him a couple of questions. The man bowed, and Noah and Nikolai did the same, introducing themselves in return and thanking the manager for coming. Michael took a quick look at the player, who was infamous in the game packs, but he looked quite normal. The man announced that he would lead the boys to the inspection zone, and a few seconds later, they moved to another location. Nicole began to actively look around. She had never seen anything like this before. The trio found themselves in a separate training room, which players use to practice their skills or conduct combat. As mentioned earlier, several combat tests will be conducted to check if there is any help from the program. Michael asked clarifying questions and also asked if Noah agreed to be tested, and he nodded. The manager announced that training had begun and quickly clicked something on his tablet. Behind the players, the automatic door slowly opened, letting out a cold breath. The robot, Itinel, appeared before the users as a mid-level one, which was also noted by viewers, who said that a bot for basic training is nothing compared to this. As soon as Michael announced that the test would begin with the mid-level training robot, Noah's eyes suddenly darkened. No one could have imagined what the guy was experiencing at that moment when the hands of groaning ghosts immediately reached out to him. The manager couldn't see the player's reaction while looking at the tablet, so he decided to read out the basic rules before the fight began. However, he barely had time to turn his gaze to Noah when an explosion was heard, and even stones began to fall from the ceiling. The man looked around in confusion, not noticing the subject next to him. He muttered something, and barely managed to use his tablet to shield himself from the stones flying towards him. Michael continued babbling something, no longer looking ahead. He was so afraid of being thrown out of the game if he was injured. The man's laughter faded as Noah's attacks intensified, and commentators were amazed that the user was crushing a mid-level Etanol with his bare fists. Michael was amazed by the scene before him. The user had simply torn off the robot's head, and the program on the tablet showed that no outside interference had been detected. The subject's face was scary to look at, and it definitely wasn't cheating. Noah's eyes turned white, and he deftly jumped away from the rubble of Etanol. Then he stood next to the manager and kicked the robot, announcing that everything was ready. Michael swallowed hard, replying that he hadn't been able to detect any external programs in this battle, but the scan time was still too short. He then asked if the player could fight in the way that would be explained to him. The guy nodded. Auto-combat cheat is a proxy control system controlled by software that cannot perform combat actions at the user's discretion unless the player decides in advance how they intend to win the battle, and then, by fighting according to that plan, can prove that they are not cheating. Michael explained this, then described the mission: to chop off the heads of the medium training bots with Noah's chain-scythe. The manager raised an eyebrow as he activated the program on the tablet, thinking that this was absolutely not profitable for the guy. The mechanical gates opened again, and first the strong mechanical legs of the robots appeared. 3 large robots rushed at the player, but Michael simply could not imagine that the guy would lose. The Eternals immediately began to hit the place where Noah stood at the same time. He, despite the falling blows, was able to deftly jump back. After waiting for the robots to rush after him, the guy wrapped his long chain braid around their heads. It didn't take him even 5 minutes to deal with his opponents. One strong jerk, and the next moment the mechanical trinity was already lying on the floor, decapitated. Michael blinked his eyes in bewilderment, while Nicole was delighted, asking the audience if they had seen how the chains moved. The manager chuckled, realizing that he had thus collected enough data for verification. But, as an administrator, he wanted to know if Noah could defeat an advanced-level training bot with only one main ability. The man hesitated for a long time, knowing that he was being greedy, but he still could not resist the temptation. The room filled with smoke, and the mechanical door slowly rose upward. A face and 2 red lights appeared from the darkness of the barn. A moment later, an advanced humanoid robot appeared before those present and spectators. An advanced bot, a later version of Etanol, Michael announced that he would continue testing with a higher bot. Noah's eyes turned black again, the ghosts of the past making themselves known. He didn't move, watching as the bot slowly approached him. Memories brought back a horrifying image of how this same robot had killed many of his friends. For a moment, the guy even thought that Etanol's mechanical face was mocking him. Noah couldn't stand this. He bared his teeth, almost growling like a wild animal. The bot suddenly lunged forward, moving incredibly fast, and even managed to hit the player. Noah jumped back sharply, a fresh, deep cut showing on his cheek. Etanol moved uncertainly, but the guy still managed to keep himself from being killed. There were 3 huge dents on the wall behind him. These blows were intended for the player. As expected, the intermediate bots don't even compare to this. It would be bad if Noah let himself get hit. Running up to Etanol, Noah pulled his arm back and punched her torso. The bot's body hardness was on a completely different level. It could not be harmed. Noah once again dodged Etonel's follow-up blow. The guy's fist burned from the failed attack, but he couldn't afford to give up. It was decided to simply beat the bot until the damage intensified. The commentators noticed the guy's incredible fighting spirit, and he really became scared. The task force manager watched tensely. In fact, Noah could only match the advanced bot in one primary ability. Previously, it seemed like he had been pushed back. But now it has become extremely clear that the player is starting to put pressure on Etonel. Seemingly futile to continue checking, Michael pressed a button on his tablet, recalling the bot. Etonel disappeared, leaving Noah confused. The manager explained that he had turned it off because enough data had been collected for verification. The man said that it was clearly confirmed that no external program was involved, and Noah was not a cheater. The streamer looked into the camera, reminding viewers that she had already spoken about Noah's innocence. She ordered to never forget this. Noah never used cheats, he just has a mastery of mechanics on the level of cheats. Nicole winked at the guy and asked him how he felt. He hesitated, muttering that they had done a good job, and at that point, the girl ended the stream. The manager and players bowed to each other. Nicole thanked them for participating in the stream and that Michael readily accepted the request for verification. The man smiled, embarrassed by Noah's calm answer, and almost left the location, but suddenly the player stopped him. He looked nervous and asked permission to ask one question. A user asked if there had been any bugs in the game before, something like someone getting stuck for a very long time. Michael replied that he had never heard of anything like that, and that if Reverse Planet had a critical bug, it would not have been released. Noah agreed with this, and he and Nicole finally said goodbye to the manager. The girl clapped her hands, saying that she planned to share the income from the stream with the guy, but he simply thought that he didn't need anything and asked the streamer to contact him. Nicole froze, and for some reason became embarrassed, which confused her interlocutor. She couldn't let him go so easily. She also couldn't force him to attend the streams because today, for example, she only forced him to come to explain himself. So Nicole bowed again and retreated. Noah was not happy with the result because he did not receive as much information as he expected. He also received a message from Sandra, who was waiting for him in the room to prepare for the fight. Noah didn't share her enthusiasm. He had to watch the audience's reaction when he played the game, and he wasn't happy with that. The girl grabbed her friend tightly, asking if he was happy with this outcome. He was just playing and not monitoring the chat. Sandra exclaimed that she would set everything up, and then her friend would make a decision, then pressed something on the dashboard. A sign with the inscription PvP appeared above the couple, and Sandra was the one who wanted to play. PvP stands for Player versus Player and is a game mode where players compete against each other. It is one of the most popular game modes in Reverse Planet, along with PvE, Player versus Environment. Only now did Noah understand why he had been called so suddenly. The girl nodded with displeasure. Did her friend really want to leave without playing with her? The user tried to convince Sandra that this wasn't right for him, but she wouldn't let Noah leave, as this mode is the main content in the game, and you can't jump to conclusions just by playing the tutorial. Noah thought, because PvE is very similar to another world, but everything he sees in PvP will seem new to the player. But there may be something else there besides the story mode. Finally, Noah agreed, and then Sandra decided to talk about PvP. First of all, it is a duel. A fight with opponents of equal strength. There are two modes, solo and duo. The first one to get 3 points wins. There are several modes, capture the flag, king of the hill, escort, and deathmatch. In this game, you can choose the game mode and fight in a team of 5 people. Today, the guys will be playing Battle Royale, which is a game where 100 people are distributed across several zones, searching for loot and fighting. It's a royal battle in which the last person or team remaining alive wins. Since Noah had never played the game before, Sandra suggested they team up and the guy needs a build to play. Noah refused the recommendation. He already knew one thing. Because of this assembly, he was called a Superman in another world. While Sandra was concentrating on pressing buttons, a friend suggested preparing his own build. They started with a popular spawn, a military base, a place where various high-level gear is evenly distributed. Since high-level players flock there, it is not suitable for beginners. Sandra begged Noah for permission to record today's game and post it online. The guy rolled his eyes, agreeing to literally everything, and urged his friend to calm down. Finally, the girl announced that she was entering the system and pressed the Start button. Spawn point. Military base. The game should start in 60 seconds. Sandra saluted her friend, exclaiming that they would see each other there. Noah soon found himself in a location where an unfamiliar player appeared with him. The young man began to look around and comment out loud on where he found himself. He didn't particularly like the corridor on the 3rd floor. He muttered that he had to go to another area as Noah quickly moved towards the player, grabbing him by the shoulder. Sandra appeared a little later and flinched when explosions thundered behind her. After a few seconds, the system signs began to appear, indicating that it was consistently killing other players. The girl opened her mouth, looking in shock at the pile of signs in front of her. Meanwhile, Noah amazed another user with his ability, who only managed to let out a muffled cry. When the boy fell to the ground, Noah realized that he couldn't feel the presence of other players. Despite this, the player did not expect to encounter 4 people at once while descending. Now that he was done farming loot, it was finally time to leave. But at that moment, Sandra's voice was heard. The girl begged her friend to help her. She was surrounded by opponents. Noah immediately called up the system map on the screen and realized that the girl was located a block across the street, quite far away. The guy said that he was already on his way and asked what part of the building Sandra was in. She answered haltingly that she was currently on the roof of the 3rd floor. She also added that there was such a loud noise coming from below that it seemed as if someone was fighting on every floor. Noah proceeded to the desired location, meeting 2 players on his way. They were amazed by the guy's quick reaction. One user ordered the second to prepare his abilities for battle. They hoped in vain that they would stop the player. Noah attacked the guys in a matter of seconds. After just 1 blow, the second user was killed. His partner cursed. He strained and let out a muffled cry, and a purple flame appeared right from the player's palms. Apparently, he was using a bolt with dexterity and physical damage. Wishing Noah death, the user released a whole column of flame in his direction. By that time, the guy's eyes had already darkened, which meant that his agility and reaction had increased. The enemy cursed when he saw how easily the stranger dodged such an attack. He didn't even realize that Noah had appeared right next to him and attacked him with 1 movement of his hand. So, Baby Rex was defeated by Noah in a matter of minutes, despite his overconfidence. His body slowly dissolved into thin air as the boy ran on to save his girlfriend. Throughout his subsequent journey, he encountered stronger enemies, but they all failed. Finally, Noah approached the main gate of the Danish castle, which he informed his friend about, and she offered to go down for help. Answering that she just needed to wait there, the guy took hold of the door handle. Trying to open the door, the player felt danger and his eyes turned black again. When the player entered the room, he immediately realized that there were 5 opponents inside. The attackers seemed to know about the guy's arrival and were waiting for him at the door with a machete in their hands. With a bloodthirsty smile, one of them slowly moved his hand right behind Noah's back. But before he could lower the machete, his hand was immediately intercepted, grabbed by the wrist. The smile immediately disappeared from the guy's face. He began to tremble, blinking awkwardly and looking at the vice he found himself in. Noah didn't hesitate and immediately punched his opponent in the stomach with all his might. The dead body fell to the ground like a heavy weight, and Noah thought he needed to speed up. He literally climbed the long staircase in a few jumps so quickly that the player's body did not have time to completely evaporate. Sandra, who was on the 3rd floor, looked at the signs about the player murders in shock. She didn't expect at all that Noah would deal with everyone so quickly. A chainsaw appeared in the girl's hands. Sensing someone else's presence behind her, she turned around sharply and turned it on. Noah backed away in fear. The saw would have practically cut him in half if he had stood even a little closer. Sandra looked truly crazy. With such a weapon in her hands, she stammered that she didn't notice Noah until he was next to her. Sandra giggled, asking if the guy had destroyed all the enemies in the building and the strange weapon was the only thing she could find. The girl blushed, exclaiming with a smile that she couldn't lose to her friend, but now that he was here, she had to continue the game. Several hours passed, and eventually Sandra was barely able to stand when the game ended, with Noah and her having won 10 times in a row. In any case, her friend, whom she thought was an ordinary college student, turned out to be a crazy killing machine. Smiling radiantly, she asked if Noah could wait for her for a couple of days without completing the main tasks. Then the girl would make him an official proposal. Noah tried to say he wasn't interested, but Sandra interrupted him, asking him to think about it, and left the game. Noah fell silent and shook his head, left alone in the location. Unfortunately, he couldn't get any hints from the PvP mode either. That evening, Nicole lay in her bed, engrossed in reading the Reverse Planet forum. She was incredibly happy because many people mentioned her stream in their posts. The girl clutched the phone to her chest, exclaiming that this was a real jackpot. With 100,000 viewers on her stream, will anything like this happen again in her streaming career? Nicole felt sad, thinking that she wanted to continue streaming with Noah. Maybe she should try a little harder. But the guy's reaction said otherwise. It seemed like he had made a decision. But first she needed to get his share. Nicole decided to see how much they earned. Seeing the amount, the streamer blushed and opened her mouth. She didn't expect this at all. The next day, Noah met with Sandra. The guy was curious why her friend called her so suddenly. She turned the laptop towards Noah with anticipation on her face, and the boy saw a strange picture advertising a streaming project. Sandra exclaimed that it was a presentation she had prepared overnight to convince her friend. He was horrified by such productivity. Was it really worth wasting time on something like that? But even in the game, the girl persuaded Noah to just play and not watch the comments, no matter how wonderful that would be. And now Sandra has suggested launching their joint reality show, a broadcast format in which several actors gather in a studio and watch footage of other actors. So, the girl game would maintain contact with the audience, and Noah would play the game. If he thinks that one is not enough, he can attract professional casters. The profits would be split 6-4, and even so, Noah muttered that he wasn't interested. Then Sandra noticed that her friend knew little about streaming profits and asked if he had made any profit from Nicole's stream. Then Noah remembered the letter he had received from the streamer, which he hadn't read in the morning. Seeing the amount in the letter, Sandra exclaimed that it was blasphemy not to be interested in such money. Then Noah looked at the donations that Nicole sent him and was stunned. An anonymous viewer with the nickname 62 seemed to hint that he knew his number and that the guy had played in a past life. The player jumped up and asked Sandra if it was possible to find out information about the donor, but she said that it probably couldn't be done due to privacy laws. Moreover, Noah won't be able to send them a message first. They can only communicate during the broadcast. The guy couldn't pass up the opportunity to solve the mystery and agreed to participate in the streams, which made Sandra incredibly happy. The girl didn't waste any time and announced on the forum the start of a stream in which Noah was among the main characters. On a beautiful Friday evening, everyone can enjoy their leisure time, and everyone has their own expectations about it. Those who proudly call themselves nerds gather in front of their computers in united anticipation. These people were eagerly awaiting Chiterigama's legendary stream while eating fried chicken. With 5 minutes left before the game started, Sandra and the invited podcaster were in the broadcast studio. The girl was literally shaking, but her interlocutor urged Sandra not to worry because they had prepared thoroughly so there shouldn't be any problems. When Toms, a professional commentator, received the call and was asked to take part in the broadcast, he was also very nervous. The guy admitted that he never thought that there would be anyone other than Nicole who could challenge Chiterigama to a stream. The camera turned blue, and Sandra blushed, nervously exclaiming that it was time to go live. Tom, who had dozens of events behind him, also blushed a little but was ready. The camera turned on and Sandra introduced herself, followed by Tom saying hello. Viewers immediately started inviting Noah to join the stream, and the girl noticed the general confusion, but still said that it was too early to be disappointed. After all, Chiterigama is already in the game. Indeed, Noah has arrived at the location. He wore a mask, as required by privacy regulations. The show will be held in a reality format, with viewers commenting while watching Chiterigama's gameplay. Sandra winked at the camera, expressing confidence that everyone was eager to see the guy in gameplay. In Noah's hands was a radio through which the Bureau for the Management of the Otherworld was distributing a message. Players were required to rescue survivors so they could safely escape the forest and join the others. The mission was to join the Security World Management Bureau and get past the guards who were searching for the escaped test subject. For Noah, everything was nothing new. But in that world, he focused only on escape. But this time, he decided that everything would be different. He would no longer be weak. The guy froze for a moment, took a deep breath, and screamed at the top of his lungs. Of course, several guards who were hunting for the hero heard him. The masked men ran closer and spread out to attack the fugitive from 3 sides. Noah's eyes became darker than night, and his being was filled with an unprecedented rage. Ghosts of the past have once again emerged from the rivers of blood, begging for revenge and to kill everyone. The guards stopped and started shooting at Noah with machine guns. He immediately began to deflect the bullets in his usual manner, using a chain-scythe. The guards didn't expect this and could only watch as the scythe knocked the weapons out of their hands. With his attacks, Noah managed to cause several explosions in the location. One of the viewers slowly scrolled his mouse, reading the comments on the forums. Professional gambler. Edgar rested his cheek on his hand, suddenly coming across a curious comment. After reading what the audience wrote about him, Edgar burst out laughing because people thought that Kitaragama would defeat him. A few days later, it was time for the second stream, which Noah also agreed to. Anonymous Viewer 62 did not appear on the last stream. The guy wondered what else he needed to do, since last time he had easily dealt with the guards. Sparing neither his own nor his opponent's strength, the player wielded the scythe with all his might. Dark eyes stared intently at the enemies who continued to attack. But the spectators did not see this look because the player's face was hidden by a mask. However, Tom and Sandra were shocked by the game. Tom had never even seen such gameplay in his entire career as a commentator. He said that Noah had no strategy and he just gathered all the players in his path. Someone donated a large amount, asking if the ultimate creature was too broken. It doesn't look like it has a cooldown. Sandra asked Tom's opinion on the matter, and he replied that he could say right now that it was not so. Most skills have their own unique cooldowns, which can make Chitarigama seem overly strong, considering how he uses his ability without a cooldown. But the absolute being only increases the user's physical abilities. It does not affect his combat intelligence or weapon proficiency. Moreover, he does not use amplifiers. It generally seems to him that the player could fight like this in real life if he had the same physical abilities. In other words, only he was able to unlock the potential of the absolute being. Passing the corpses of their comrades, the other guards slowly surrounded the user. Ben from the Otherworld Control Bureau ordered Noah to drop his weapon and surrender. He was from a government department that destroys invading entities that come through dimensional gates. It's primarily about finding and destroying dangerous creatures that intrude into the reverse world, where dimensions blend together. Thus, the world that users know showed itself from a different side. Noah obediently raised his hands and did not resist. He did not expect to meet Director Ben here, who by this time had already become the team leader. The man ordered the guards to retreat, apologizing to the victim who'd escaped from the laboratory for mistaking him for an enemy, but Noah replied that everything was fine. The guy showed Ben the walkie-talkie, saying that the guy from the lab gave it to him. He shook his head, replying that he was most likely already dead, and Noah noticed the sentimentality of the group leader. Ben asked the player to remain in the Otherworld Control Bureau until his identity was confirmed, and he agreed. When Noah arrived at the Otherworld Management Bureau headquarters, the system announced that the main task had been completed, the player's level had been increased, and he had received 1 ability point. He was brought to the Bureau's consulting office, and he never thought he would ever find himself there. In another world, the hero collected funds for his revenge by accepting requests from a company after escaping from a laboratory. Noah took on all sorts of jobs, such as assassinations and kidnappings, but the biggest one was enslaving the monsters of the reverse planet. The company tasked him with clearing out the reverse planet to get battle trophies. Whenever the staff decided that the loot was useless, the cleaning was delegated to the guy, which led to frequent clashes with the Bureau. Sometimes they even collaborated on operations, but sometimes conflicts occurred. The door opened, and the room was filled with the scent of women's perfume. A ringing female voice greeted Noah. Jackie introduced herself. She was a member of the Bureau's first team, and the commentators did not miss the opportunity to notice how beautiful this character was. Noah said hello. The girl noticed that he had come a long way and sat down at the table opposite him. Jackie offered the player two options: continue to live as a normal person under the protection of the Bureau, in which case the use of abilities is strictly prohibited. The second option is to become a member of the Bureau. If Noah chooses the latter option, he may not act as an official agent anytime soon. After some training, once the Bureau decides he is ready, the guy is sent on a mission. The user thought about it because he killed one of the agents in that world, but now they ask the guy to become an ally. The girl propped her cheek on her hand and leaned closer, asking which option Noah would choose now. He clasped his hands together, nervously fiddling with his fingers. He was still deciding. If he decides to remain a civilian, he will end up taking corporate contracts here and there, and he would not like to go down that path again. Finally, he announced that he would be an agent. Jackie clapped her hands, saying that the guy made the right decision because his joining would be a huge help to the Bureau. Lately, corporations have been searching for awakened ones, so they are short of people. Jackie lowered her voice, saying she wasn't speaking as an agent, but she had heard many people regret signing with them. Because they are still in the early stages of awakened training, the corporations lack the necessary experience. They don't even take responsibility for accidents during training. But the Bureau is an organization with a long history and has extensive knowledge in training awakened ones and conquering the reverse world. Of course, the League of Enterprises offers better rewards, but their missions are more dangerous. In another world, there were many awakened who died while fulfilling the requests of corporations. They even refused to pay for some requests, and in the end, Noah had to use force to get them to pay. Due to this incident, they discovered that the player was an unregistered awakened, resulting in the Bureau pursuing him for some time. Jackie said that she was going to ask the guy to register with their IT team. This phone is for work use. Noah asked where he should start. The girl replied that he would undergo training and receive a promotion as soon as the Bureau confirmed his abilities. Jackie hoped that the guy would be sent to Team 1, which she was a part of, and the player agreed with the employee. After all, he was indebted to Jackie while he was in that world, even though they had many fights. Thanks to the girl who led the raid on the laboratory, Noah and his comrades were able to survive. The girl shook the hero's hand, saying that she was looking forward to the opportunity to work with him. Sandra was surprised that her friend was able to talk so casually with the NPC. She even asked Tom if it was even possible to communicate like that with NPCs. After all, when she was in Noah's place, Jackie answered the question with the same plot-based answer like a robot. This is what this girl was like when Sandra met her in Reverse Planet. Tom couldn't answer because he was shocked. He couldn't believe that Jackie looked like a fully adaptive artificial intelligence. This is an NPC that can fully respond to any situation or request. Unlike existing NPCs, he can communicate freely and without problems. This is a technology that takes up a lot of resources, and most people thought it was impossible to implement in an online game. Could it be that the developers have completely solved the resource problem? Most likely, there is a certain condition that needs to be met to unlock this feature. The minimum requirement for this is to start without combat correction, just like with Noah. Sandra shook her head, admitting that her friend was truly special. In any case, the girl thought that this would stir up the forum, and Tom was planning to stay awake, waiting for what the developer would announce. One important character is very interested in the storyline. In this situation, she would be interested. Perhaps it would be possible to attract a big figure to this show as a guest. Sandra announced to viewers that they should now wait for the next stream if they were interested in learning more. From now on, the stream will switch to PvP content. This time, Noah was in the fight preparation room. He thought thoughtfully that Anonymous Spectator 62 had not yet appeared. He found out about it the day Sandra gave that stupid presentation. The guy insisted that his friend let him know if she saw any donations or comments from someone with that nickname. So until Sandra contacted him, he would have to continue the stream. The hero warned his friend that he was ready, and she confirmed to the audience that the next stage of the game was PvP. Today, a duel was on the agenda, and Noah was standing in front of a large hologram with the corresponding icon. Sandra noted that this was the guy's first time playing in this mode, and Tom added that he would start in a regular league. There are 7 ranks in the game: Bronze, Silver, Gold, Platinum, Diamond, Master, Grandmaster, Challenger, and to get Bronze, you need to win 10 times in the regular league. Tom said that, statistically, it takes a professional player about 30 minutes, while the average player needs about 2 hours. The reward for achieving bronze in 30 minutes was quite good, as Sandra immediately noted. She told her friend about it, pointing out that it was a jackpot mission, and the guy showed that he understood everything. The girl admitted that this was all getting interesting, and Tom suggested watching until the end to find out if Chitarigama could complete the mission. The matchmaking for the PvP Showdown solo mode was successful, and Noah found himself in the residential area of the 6th zone. Tom took a closer look at the hero, opposite whom another player had already appeared. Noah uses a weapon he has never seen before, and the boy himself only now realized how much he is underestimated. He had a blade in each hand, while the enemy was aiming a magic sphere at him. However, if Noah didn't get into the enemy's reach, victory would be his. The countdown sounded, and the player opposite raised his hand with an ice sphere. He barely had time to pronounce the name of the attack when he suddenly fell silent, this time for good. As it turned out, in a matter of seconds, Noah managed to cross the corridor and cut the overconfident magician in half. He moved so smoothly and silently that no one could have predicted such a quick end to the experienced fighter. It was the end of the first round. Noah emerged victorious and received a point for the battle. The next round also ended with an unconditional victory for the player, as the opponent immediately surrendered and the showdown was over. It was time for the second game, where Noah also silently wielded his blades. The defeated user only managed to express regret to his shadow spears before dying, which Noah chopped into small pieces. The player simply cut the man, like the first opponent, into pieces. The third game featured an attack by a strange character who fought bare-handed and wore a battle kimono. The man's face tensed comically, but at the same moment, he was slashed by Noah's daggers. At this point, the fourth game also came to an end, with Noah emerging victorious again. Thus, the amount of time it took the hero to win 10 times in a row was only 20 minutes. Sandra and Tom were shocked that in such a short amount of time Noah had risen in the rankings and received bronze. The girl mumbled that it was amazing. Tom couldn't get over the shock, and the spectators also couldn't believe what they were seeing. The commentator added that while the total time spent by the user is undeniable, what is even more surprising is his match records. People usually see the problem when they encounter contracts or risky builds. However, Noah didn't care what his opponents brought to the table. He consistently put in a great performance during his matches. It was complete instant destruction. Overjoyed, one viewer donated a large sum, writing that he didn't believe what this guy had done, that he was truly crazy. Sandra was overjoyed. Thanks to the generous donor, she was excited to see how Noah would perform in the upcoming ranked games. Tom agreed, adding that he was a little worried that since they were streaming, it would be easy for people to stream snipe the guy. However, achieving success in stream sniping is not easy, so the commentator hoped that his worries were for nothing. Matchmaking for the PvP Showdown mode, solo ranked, was successful, and a new location has appeared in the 11th zone, the cemetery. When Noah got there, a blonde stranger appeared in front of him. It was the stream sniper who promised to destroy the cheater on his broadcast. Noah frowned even more than before and slowly pulled the blades from behind his back. But this mockery didn't seem to affect Chitarigama at all. Sandra advised her friend to simply ignore it when something like this happened. She coughed, not even imagining what would happen next. And meanwhile, the battle began. The first round began, and the unknown player screamed hysterically, spreading his arms out to the sides, and a bright light mixed with lightning poured out of his body. Magical forces lifted him up, and the boy's body flew towards Noah. He laughed madly, sending a series of lightning bolts at his enemy and wishing him death. Noah swung his blade, wanting to give the stranger a chance simply because he was so confident. But it turned out that this was just a waste of time, and so the hero cut off the overconfident streamer in mid-flight. Blood spurted from the anonymous opponent's mouth, and he hissed that Chitterigama was a real monster. Thus, by the beginning of the next round, the player has lost 1 life. He quickly typed something on the system screen, nervous that he would lose again. It looked like he would have to use a special technique. When the second round began, the anonymous man's body began to change. His shoulders became broader, and the number of lightning bolts increased. Noah was surprised to notice that the guy's atmosphere seemed to have changed. Now it was the user's turn to surprise the audience. He flew up to Noah like a bullet and swung his hand at him. He opened his eyes, realizing that the anonymous man's attack had become much sharper and more powerful than before. His movements were extremely effective, like Eternel's. The guy laughed again, baring his teeth, and asked the cheater if he understood what was happening. Shouting that he had simply gone easy on him in the first round, the warrior attacked Noah with several powerful blasts. The boy took this shameful nickname with displeasure, covering his face with both hands. Sandra remembered that she had once told a friend that if he heard someone calling him a cheater, he should destroy that person. Now that the attack had been made and the words had been spoken, Noah slowly pulled his hands away from his face. His eyes turned black, and his hands automatically reached for his blades. The opponent immediately noticed that the man in front of him was emitting a strange energy. But the anonymous man reassured himself that it didn't matter how he looked at it, as long as he had the advantage. He pounced on Noah with a lightning attack, telling the damn cheater to stop showing off. But the protagonist was not going to wait for so many discharges to fall on him, and rushed forward. The anonymous man gritted his teeth and trembled when he didn't find the cheater in front of him. He cursed dirty at him, turning his body, and Noah found himself right behind the guy. With one sharp blow, Noah severely cut the hand that was generating fire. Anonymous cursed again, this time from the searing pain that pierced his entire body. Then the main character jumped forward and appeared in front of the scoundrel to cut him off. Angry tears gushed from someone else's eyes. He clenched his teeth so hard to keep from screaming that blood came from his lower lip. The camera broadcasting the stream almost caught fire from the high temperature. Sandra and Tom looked at each other, the same thought immediately occurring to them. The girl asked if Noah was deliberately not finishing him off. Tom reminded that the player carefully followed other people's advice. However, it was Sandra who personally told him to completely destroy the enemy. The audience agreed that the girl herself created this monster. Meanwhile, Noah had cornered the anonymous man, threatening him with a blade. He sat leaning against a tombstone and angrily asked who Noah was. He decided to answer himself, and his opponent saw his reflection in the blade of the sword in horror. The second round ended with such a sad outcome for Anonymous, with a victory for Noah. After that, the guy continued his matches at an unstoppable pace, winning 30 victories in a row. Sandra confirmed the gold medal with a trembling voice, and Tom would never have thought that the player would have a 30-win streak on his first stream. The girl saw someone ask to share a build. She knew she should ask a friend first. She sent Noah a message and asked if she could show people his build. And if he was against it, he could refuse. So Sandra announced to the audience that Noah had agreed to talk about his bidet. Together with Tom, they took a bow, announcing that the next stream would start soon, and thanking the commentators for the time spent together. When the camera turned off, Tom excitedly shouted that it was amazing, from the fully adaptive AI and 30 wins to Noah revealing his build. Sandra dreamed that her friend would break the world record with such speed, and her interlocutor read that the current record for the most victories in the showdown mode is 76, and it belongs to Edgar. The girl was already hoping with all her might that Noah would be able to break the record. Since Edgar is known for his competitiveness, he might already be watching Chitterigama. And it was really so. The guy could not miss the opportunity to observe a potential enemy. The mouse cursor itself was drawn to a forum thread concerning the stream sniper. Edgar muttered something under his breath as he read more information about that weirdo in the game. He laughed again when he saw another message about his failure. The next stream started in a few days. The location chosen was a light forest. Noah changed into the dark suit of the Otherworld Management Bureau. He again pondered the fact that anonymous viewer 62 did not show up for the last stream. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Jackie's scream. She, dressed in the Bureau's sports uniform, was calling the intern to her. The girl asked if Noah was nervous, since this was his first practical assignment, and he just shrugged his shoulders and replied that he was fine. As soon as Noah entered the game, he immediately received the first task. It's good that he could skip the training stage, since it's a game. The pair approached the gate. Jackie explained that Noah would need to destroy the invading creatures and close the space. This is another place that the League of Enterprises has given up on. The Bureau says almost nothing to them, since sometimes they can be useful. Jackie shook her head sadly, saying that once corporations realize they're not going to achieve much, they just throw it away like that. The recurring entities this time were low-threat insects. At the entrance to the building, guests were met by Sergeant Sam, who asked if Noah was the one awakened from the Bureau. Jackie answered for him, showing her ID and adding that she appreciated the hard work of men, and then she and Noah were let in. It was madness. Those who entered saw for the first time how a portal appeared in the abandoned factory. Looking there, Noah became curious about why this place immediately seemed familiar to him. The guy had definitely seen it once before in another world, and he clearly remembered that it was of medium size, not small. Just when he thought it was a bug, Jackie asked if they could go. An awakened Fred, associated with MTI Electronics, appeared out of nowhere, exclaiming, "What brought the elder Jackie here for a minor suppression?" The trio stood at the portal. Jackie asked what the guy was doing there. He replied that he was just as shocked. He didn't expect that his mission would intersect with the mission of the Elder. The girl asked what the unit's mission was, especially after they had abandoned their past and surrendered. Were they really planning something? Fred chuckled and called the assessment mean, then looked at Noah, calling him a newbie. He started talking to the guy as if he were a child, urging him not to waste his time in the Bureau and to join a big corporation. Jackie turned around and, in a not at all kind voice, asked him not to cross the line. Fred waved his hands, disowning his words, saying that he would let the older one deal with it. He, whistling something under his breath, went home, frivolously saying goodbye to everyone. Noah asked who it was, and Jackie shook her head, replying that the guy was the first agent trainee she had ever worked with. Ever since he left the Bureau after the Enterprise League tracked him down, he has been spreading false rumors about the Bureau. Tom and Sandra, watching the couple, were amazed by such a detailed depiction of the relationship. It was initially stated that only bad things would happen between the characters. With fully adaptive artificial intelligence, viewers will be able to experience a deeper story. Finally, Jackie offered Noah some candy, then urged him to enter the portal. The portal reflected the alien's entrance with a bright flash, illuminating the dark space. The corporation's people standing outside saw a glimmer of bright light. Fred licked his lips carnivorously and winked at the others, saying that it was time to begin, since the senior and the intern had entered the portal. The other world greeted the guests with a gloomy atmosphere. All the charm of the forest was completely lost here. Noah, his eyes darkened, slowly wiped the blood spatter from his face with his fist. The guy had a blade in his hands, but he looked down, and from the outside it might have seemed that he had mortally wounded his older sister Jackie. The candy the girl offered him was also stained crimson with blood. Previously, everything was going as usual. Jackie and Noah calmly entered the portal. The girl showed the exit to the reverse planet. There was another portal very close by. The guy nodded and followed, thinking that it was just like in the other world. But the peaceful moments ended, and an earthquake of unprecedented proportions began. Noah froze, trying to stay on his feet. He had been in something like this before. Standing in front, Jackie turned around excitedly and called the intern's name. The portal in front of her rapidly expanded, swallowing up the slender figure. The forest of the reverse world was full of silence and some otherworldly peace. A few minutes later, Noah found himself alone with the camera, probably having appeared separately from his mentor. The path often splits due to external forces, so the guy immediately reached for the knife. At that very moment, a multitude of monsters, huge spiders, appeared from the treetops right in front of the player. Without hesitation, Noah grabbed the handle of his knife with both hands, and immediately his eyes turned darker than night. He'd get rid of those bastards before he started looking for Jackie. Good thing the user could use Thunder Echo. The flames emanating from his figure poured out onto the creatures that surrounded the man. Jackie was also fighting huge insects at this time. She wiped the sweat from her face, wielding the same blade. The creatures continued to advance, and then there was the size of this forest. It looked more like a medium-sized reverse planet than a small one. For a moment it was quiet again. Something was definitely wrong. The girl thought about Noah, hoping that he was okay, and did not notice the traitor behind her. It was Fred, who had secretly followed the Bureau's employees into the portal and was now treacherously attacking the mentor. She gave a muffled cry and quickly ran away to a safe distance. Jackie angrily asked why Fred had done this to her, and he, possessing special body transformation abilities, only chuckled, mockingly calling it a secret mission. Jackie cursed as she heard the footsteps of the rest of the corporation members. They were simply following orders and nothing personal. The girl spat out that it was some kind of nonsense, but she held her side. The wound was too deep. She also used Thunder Echo because she needed to get out of here. It was necessary to somehow attack the insolent people, and Jackie did it with the last of her strength. She waved her hand and a stone block appeared in front of her opponents. A stone guard. A few seconds later, the stone exploded, and the man was thrown back by the blast wave. The soldier fell on his back like a helpless insect, and Jackie chose the opportune moment to escape. Fred was beside himself with rage. He ordered the others to catch up with the girl. While the fallen were trying to get back on their feet, Jackie ran forward with all her might. She clapped her hands as she ran, calling on the forces of fire to help. Then she spread her arms to the sides, creating a long electrical impulse. Jackie gave a warlike cry and raised her hand to strike with lightning like a lasso. Her plan worked. Streams of fire poured right under the feet of the enemies gathered together. The girl, hearing shouts and orders to block her attack, ran even faster. The fighters rushed after her, but lost sight of her and began to blame each other. They ran straight down the road where they had seen Jackie looking for her in the bushes and among the trees. The warrior acted cunningly. She dived into a hole camouflaged by branches and clung to the edge. When the sound of footsteps died down, she pulled herself up to the edge with her hands. If it weren't for the hole, everything would have ended badly. Meanwhile, Noah had already successfully dealt with several huge monsters. As he moved further into the forest, he was convinced that he felt Jackie's presence, but something had happened because they never met. Suddenly, the boy heard someone's warlike cry and immediately recognized the owner of the voice. The camera rushed faster than the player in the direction from which the noise was heard. As it turned out, Jackie was in danger. She was definitely unlucky. The huge centipede had already clamped the girl in its grip, and Noah immediately rushed to help his mentor. Just a few movements and the monster's huge body was cut into pieces. Jackie was free but began to fall rapidly from a height. Noah immediately ran to her. While pieces of the centipede were falling to the ground, the boy managed to pick up his mentor in his arms. Noah carefully leaned Jackie against a tree. She was breathing heavily and didn't even immediately understand who saved her. The player quickly examined the girl, noting her deep wounds. After all, such an experienced fighter couldn't lose to some beetle. This injury was caused by a skill attack. There was someone who could have done it given the situation. Wiping the blood from his face, Noah asked again if Fred had done it and received an affirmative answer. It seems that all the bad guys showed up immediately after the phenomenon happened. Sandra flushed with tension and shook her head, addressing the audience. She gasped as she looked at the screen, realizing something was wrong, as Noah usually waited to set up an ambush. Tom suggested watching, since the only conclusion was artificial intelligence and a possible hidden plot. Breathing heavily, Jackie said that she had managed to break away from the enemies, but the bastards from the corporation could return at any moment, and if the girl used her skills, it could give away their location. Therefore, Noah should get out of here first. The guy did not agree. He wanted to help the mentor. Jackie screamed that Fred was an awakened veteran and Noah couldn't handle him alone. Noah responded calmly, assuring them that he had a plan. At this time, the trio from the corporation were looking for Jackie, not understanding where she was hiding. Fred carefully searched the ground for evidence. He said that the girl was injured and could not have gone far. It was worth looking along the stream. But suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Fred noticed some movement. He didn't wait. and immediately directed a stream of fire towards the arriving figure. But the alien began to beg him to wait and not kill him. Fred immediately recognized the guy. He calmed the fire in his hand and asked if this was the intern who was with Jackie. Noah folded his hands in a prayerful gesture, saying that the path had suddenly ended and he had found himself separated from his mentor. Fred chuckled and patted the guy on the shoulder, laughing at his ignorance. The corporate rat's eyes lit up, and he hissed that the intern might meet Jackie very soon. But he couldn't even imagine that this very crybaby intern would catch him off guard. The sharp blade pierced Fred's chest, and he coughed loudly, being so close to his opponent. He fell to his knees when Noah pushed the guy away from him, like he was an unwanted bag, and his comrades immediately ran up to him. They surrounded their friend, not understanding what was happening to him, and by this time Noah had already disappeared into the thick bushes. One of the fighters ran after the killer while the second provided first aid to Fred. Meanwhile, Noah had already climbed onto a branch of a tall tree and was watching his fleeing pursuer from there. The man stopped and began to look around, not believing that the guy could have gone far. There was a gust of wind behind him. The fighter didn't attach any significance to it. But in fact, it was Noah who descended to the ground so quietly. The player suddenly grabbed the unsuspecting man by the neck and plunged a knife into it. At the same time, Fred's teammate was trying his best to help. He stopped the bleeding, so the commander simply needed to get some treatment. But Fred was not destined to be cured, as a spear flew into his chest from afar, knocking out the last of his spirit. The masked fighter began to look around and curse, realizing who had committed such an act. The same intern was slowly approaching him, only he looked more intimidating. The man stood up and rudely asked where his friend who was chasing the player was. Noah tilted his head to the side like an interested bird and twirled the blade in his hands. The fighter realized with horror that this was the very weapon that his comrade had. He roared in anger and jumped up to strike the guy. The man roared and launched stone blades at his opponent. Noah rushed forward, and all the blades simply flew past him. The corporation fighter shouted that he was not finished yet and began generating new abilities. He struck the ground with his hands, and waves formed right on it, which moved the Earth's rock. An earthquake began, and the mountains standing nearby began to tremble dangerously. Noah started running, but at the same time he began to look around. He ran up to a tree standing nearby and knocked it down with one kick. The player made a smart move by hooking the trunk of this tree onto a nearby one. Thus he found himself in a shelter that protected him from the vibrations of the earth. The man cursed, looking at the guy, calling him a monster. Noah didn't care about the insults and other people's actions. He simply calmly waited out the bad weather. The next second, a stone spike almost pierced the main character, but he managed to dodge. Noah jumped up and began to balance on the tree, not letting go of the sword. He gritted his teeth as a flash of fire hit his arm, leaving a wound. Pushing off from the tree trunk, he ran straight towards the man. He was standing nearby and pointing a stone spike at the enemy. The fighter was frightened and ordered not to approach him, but the player was already chopping the thorn into pieces. Noah eventually pierced his opponent with 2 blades and stopped behind him. The dying man's last words were that the boy had done the impossible. Noah just shrugged, muttering something incoherently, but the audience was delighted with him. Sandra couldn't get over it, because her friend had just finished off 3 hunting dogs using only one key element. Noah took out 2 of them in an ambush. But as expected, he still lacks a lot compared to the time when the guy was in another world. After looking around, he briefly said that he would wait and see how things went further. The guy looked at Fred's phone. There was information about Jackie and the intern, who went to the reverse world, where they would need to be killed. Noah found nothing while looking through the files, only messages. It was necessary to leave the investigation to the Bureau. Sharp returned dagger. The blade's cutting ability is increased, and when thrown, it returns to the hand that threw it at the right moment. Bracelet of the winner increases the power of the owner's ability, reduces the ability's recovery time. Hermit's necklace can be used as a shadow storage. You can always place equipment items in the storage. Noah, when examining objects, could instantly check the effects. In that world, he could only assess what effect it would give through numerous trials and errors. In any case, since the urgent matter has been settled, the player must hurry. We need to clear out the reverse world before Jackie's wounds get any worse. Meanwhile, the girl, who was left alone, got into trouble again. Huge insects hung over her fragile figure, ready to attack at any moment. It was the captain of the Scorpion Emperor entities. Jackie clutched her wound, muttering how unlucky she was, but then changed her mind. It's still good that this monster fell into her hands now. Jackie had to deal with the scorpion herself. She created a sphere of lightning in her palm. She swung her arm and was about to use the spreading technique on the insect. But before she could do anything, she realized that the monster had fallen to the ground. Looking back, she saw the huge face of a scorpion, which seemed to be worshipping her. Noah was standing on the monster's head, one foot resting on the blade he had used to kill the monster. And the guy also asked Jackie if she was okay. The girl couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her intern. At that moment, a web appeared in the sky. As if on a broken mirror, the opposite world was beginning to close. There really wasn't much time left before the world closed forever. Jackie was delighted because the trainee really did deal with the hunting dog single-handedly. Noah shook his head. He called for them to get out of there and asked the mentor to climb on his back. The mentor obediently climbed onto Noah's back, while Sandra wondered if the closure would be completed before the heroes left, if the capture was completed after the destruction of the passage. Tom confirmed that they must escape before the world was destroyed. The intern sternly asked Jackie to hold on tighter, and she obeyed, grabbing the guy. They talked for only a few seconds, but during that time, the world continued to collapse. Without wasting precious minutes, Noah hurried to the spinning portal nearby, just as the system announced that the raid was complete and the player's level had been increased. After some time, the intern and his mentor returned to the headquarters of the Measurement Management Bureau. "Department head," Ben questioned Noah, asking if it was true that Jackie had been wounded in an ambush by another awakened. Noah confirmed this, and the man shook his head in dismay as corporations had completely crossed the line. When asked what happened to them, the intern simply replied that he killed them, which caused unprecedented surprise to his superior. Noah bit his lip as he briefly recounted how things had gone that day. The guy also said that Fred's phone showed signs that he had received instructions on messaging, but everything else was blocked by the security system. Ben assured that thanks to this, the investigation would go smoothly. Let Noah leave the rest to the bureau and take a break. The man saw the rage the intern carried within himself. It was hard not to notice. He added that he was speaking not out of concern, but because there would be another chance later. So until then, Noah needed to calm down. The boss hoped that he understood what was going on. Noah exhaled and actually tried to rein in his anger a little. Sandra was glad that her friend's first mission was completed, and Tom agreed that everything was much more spectacular. As soon as the girl started talking about how the audience was probably very happy, she suddenly fell silent, looking at the screen in surprise. Anonymous Viewer 62 privately donated a large sum of money, writing that Noah had passed the first test. As agreed, Sandra immediately wrote to Noah that the same man had sent a lot of money. A friend sent a screenshot, and the guy saw that in addition to the money, the stranger wanted Noah to complete a special task, but first he had to finish the scheduled broadcast. Noah remembered that the anonymous person had already spoken about something similar and would probably say everything when the broadcast ended. Tom asked Sandra if something was wrong, and she assured him that everything was fine. She only now realized that the commentator cannot see the window with an anonymous donation. The girl tried to change the subject, exclaiming that this time the reaction was very violent, and now they should move on to PvP. Chaitarigama defeated one after another, gaining popularity in the last PvP match. Today's PvP topic will be different modes: King of the Hill, Escort, Capture the Flag, Deathmatch. These are 5-on-5 team games. The first 1 to 2 wins. The spectators, however, were not delighted as they found such battles boring. Sandra was confident that they would change their minds once they saw it for themselves and urged them to start broadcasting. The PvP game mode, Escort, was discovered. This was the first game, and several participants, including Noah, gathered at the location. Tom immediately explained to the audience what would happen on the screens. The attack team must deliver the cargo to its destination, As he spoke, a schematic explanation appeared on the screen, and also the defense team had to stop the cargo. Sandra added that this is the first 5-on-5 team game, and it will be interesting to see how Noah will behave here. The first round began, a car arrived at the location, its wheels creaking loudly. Several participants landed in the back of the car and sat down next to colorful boxes. The other players were happy to work together, encouraging each other. But at the same time, Noah for some reason did not join his teammates. Tom peered at the screen and asked in surprise if the guy was really moving away. Noah's eyes darkened, but no one could yet predict his next move. The player's friend suggested that he was going to sneak up behind his opponents, but Tom explained that people usually try to stay close to the target. But if you have the skills, then Noah's choice is not bad. But stopping 5 people alone is not easy. Viewers disagreed with this statement. Noah took a running start and began to overtake the truck, jumping deftly, pushing off the walls of the houses. Tom noticed the player's amazing speed. At this rate, he would soon run into the defending team. And indeed, not even a few minutes had passed before Noah appeared above the men sitting in ambush. He carefully calculated right in the air where it would be best to attack. A little closer to the ground and still unnoticed, Noah threw the knife down. The blade flew with pinpoint accuracy straight into the neck of one of the players. The chubby blonde screamed that Luca was here, but those were his last words. The next moment Noah found himself on the ground and had already managed to cut off the blonde's head. The other participants were shocked by the quick deaths of their comrades. Noah straightened up and reached for his blade. The opponents split up. One was going to stop the enemy and the other went for the cargo. Users who were near the car received bewildered messages about the murders. A few seconds later, the system announced the attack team's victory, and the first round was over. Sandra was also surprised. She expected such an outcome, but not so quickly. Tom shared her emotions and asked if Noah was busy now. Viewers continued to watch how quickly the stream's hero dealt with his opponents. There, 3 other modes continued. A fight to the death was marked by the rapid loss of the opposing team. Noah emerged victorious just a few minutes later and left the location. King of the Hill was no different from the other regimes. The building where the opponents were hiding was bombed. They tried to stop the madman by using various attacks. Even the most advanced players couldn't stop the advance of one man. Noah appeared suddenly and reliably attacked enemies wielding only a cold weapon. Noah's eyes turned black, and drops of blood from his fallen enemies splashed onto his neck. Finally, the flag was captured. Noah made an ace in each of them and quickly sealed the game. Anonymous viewer 62 donated again and sent a special task to open a new system through progress in the game. Sandra couldn't believe what she saw on the screen. Again, several $1,000s came from an anonymous source. She immediately wrote to Noah about it, offering to spend the money on a subscriber meeting, dinner, and gaming equipment. The guy didn't respond to this and simply asked to send him a screenshot. While Sandra was writing him a million messages with plans, the player could only think about the new system through progress he would probably need to continue playing, be it PvE or PvP. Noah sighed heavily and closed his eyes, looking at the various emoticons from his friend. Right now, it didn't matter at all. He looked up at the night sky, deciding that for now he would do what this man wanted him to do. The third cheat tour was due to take place in a few days, and Noah had arrived at the Dimensional Management Bureau's training center. He received a message from Jackie, who wrote that due to an injury she would not be able to teach him for now, but she had found a replacement. Sandra was interested in a replacement. Tom suggested that it would be someone famous. Nevertheless, Jackie came to visit her stitcher. Almost her entire body was wrapped in bandages. Noah asked how the girl was feeling, and she replied that everything was fine for now, but she wouldn't be able to teach the intern herself. The mentor looked back and exclaimed that the replacement had finally arrived. A tall girl with a short haircut and a serious look appeared before those present and briefly introduced herself. Noah also said hello and told Cynthia his name, assuring her that it was nice to meet her. Cynthia is as skilled as Ben. She is essentially the second most powerful person in the Change Management Bureau. The situation became dangerous when Noah met her as an enemy in the other world. Now that Jackie had introduced them, she was ready to go, so she sneaked out to the meeting, which really angered Cynthia. Jackie quickly ran away from the crime scene while her colleague waved her fists. However, after a few seconds, Cynthia and Noah were left alone. The teacher cleared her throat and asked Noah if he used a short or a long sword. Hearing the answer that with both swords, Cynthia thought about it. She wanted to assess the level of someone else's skill. The mentor shrugged and suggested that the trainee begin with a duel. Tom was very impressed, even confused by how events were unfolding. Sandra noticed that the two were sparring, which was common practice for swordsmen. Tom replied that not all players use a sword. And now it happened, because Noah is the main character. Sandra suddenly covered her mouth with her hand, startled, and the audience expressed the same shocked reaction. Noah thought that the AI would have limitations, even if it was fully adaptive, but that's a completely different storyline than other users. Apparently, this game has the ability to progress with a completely different story depending on the player's actions. Noah's eyes darkened. He was more focused on the duel than ever. It turns out that the game crossed the line of reality, and Cynthia behaved differently than she might have in Reverse Planet. Cynthia suggested not to use abilities, but only the sword in this sparring. Noah did not believe in the possibility of such a thing. His ability to improve the body is still active today. In that case, Cynthia will try to slow down his abilities a little. The girl smiled and announced the start of the sparring, suddenly flying up to the trainee. She moved very gracefully, using her skills, and green flames emanated from the teacher's figure. Her glowing blade almost hit Noah, but he managed to dodge it in time. Cynthia approached again and tried to take advantage of her opponent's hesitation. Noah was thrown back by another blow of green mana. Tom commented that this person and her strength could not be underestimated. Sandra clarified that the mentor was a wind god build. While the commentators were discussing the battle, Cynthia again pounced on the intern with blows. Tom replied that technically the girl was right. The wind god's build was inspired by Cynthia. But Noah is also incredible. Despite everything, he is not inferior to his mentor in speed. The audience was shocked by this supposed mini-quest, as the warrior moved at incredible speed. Suddenly, the smile disappeared from the girl's face. She saw something strange. The intern looked at her with unusual eyes, and he realized that Cynthia was looking for the brooch in his protection. But the next moment, the teacher's lips stretched into a smile again. Saying that they could take the battle a little more seriously, she sharply pushed the practice blade forward. Noah realized that this was some new technique and immediately frowned. A few seconds later, the guy's figure dissolved into a bright green light that began to rage after the mentor's attack. When the smoke cleared, Cynthia chuckled. What she expected had happened. She knew that Noah would dodge, and indeed, behind him was unprecedented destruction from someone else's blow. But the guy didn't go anywhere. He was standing right in front of the teacher. For the girl, the intern became even more surprising than she thought. Noah thought that if this were a real fight, his chances of winning would be about 20%. When asked who taught him fencing, the player replied that he was self-taught. The system announced that the task was completed, and Cynthia herself asked Noah to follow her. The guy was amazed by the scale of the place where he was brought. All kinds of bladed weapons were on display everywhere. This was the arsenal of the Dimensional Control Bureau. Theodore, the head of the Bureau's support and assistance group, noted with a smile that Mr. Noah needed a suitable weapon. Cynthia nodded, replying that the guy had weapons, but what was the point of them if there was no way to use their abilities? The man bowed, asking her to consider her choice in comfort. The mentor waved her hand, suggesting that Noah take his time with his choice. He began to examine the large room, but still had not found anything truly useful. However, he did catch his eye with something. The vampire spear Dragos, whose first effect increased the strength of the spear's blade, the second absorbed the blood on the blade and healed the owner, and the third gave control over blood. Having decided that he would probably take the spear, Noah suddenly froze, seeing something else. Behind his back hung a very special weapon, the Soul Eater, Sword of Eternal Death. The first effect cannot be destroyed. The second, the cutting power, increases depending on the number of souls absorbed. The third effect healed the owner. There were several additional and useful effects.
Noah knew that the sword must have been on the black market. Perhaps it originally belonged to the Bureau, but someone stole it.
The guy couldn't even imagine that he would find his favorite weapon from his past life in such a place. Cynthia asked the intern if he was sure. He nodded. He would definitely take the two-handed sword. The girl picked up the phone to transfer the ownership rights. Sandra was stunned when she saw what was happening on the screen. Incredibly, this was usually where you could get a weapon with two effects. Another subscriber donated money, betting that the sword could become the player's primary weapon. Tom added that this isn't the first time Noah has received a weapon that's inappropriate for this stage of the game. The Hermit's Necklace, which the guy received on the last stream, only appears mid-game. Reverse Planet gives rewards strictly depending on the risk. The more difficult the task, the greater the reward. Sandra asked if Noah was able to get the necklace because he had to defeat the hunting dogs in the first mission. Tom confirmed this. The girl's friend really did his best without making a single mistake. He did everything flawlessly, from escaping the research center to sparring with Cynthia. Sandra decided that it made sense. Noah deservedly received the Soul Eater. Of course, this was just a theory. Tom suggested we observe for now. Finally, Cynthia announced that the transfer of ownership was complete. Noah thanked her and sent the sword to his storage. Now that the trainee had a new weapon, the mentor suggested that he go on a raid. Their path led to a high mountain in the reverse world. Immediately after the bureau, the couple exited the portal. Cynthia sighed tiredly. She would never have thought that there could be a portal on the top of the mountain. She was already tired of approaching it. Considering that the bureau employee had previously said that the fighters would need to climb a little, and then they would see the mountain. This is where low-threat, wolf-beast-type invading creatures appear. They have a strong territorial instinct regarding their habitat, so soon wolves will start crowding there. Wolves are of the beast type and are more difficult to deal with than insects, but everyone below rank B is the same. Cynthia smiled. Wishing him luck, she would intervene if the situation became dangerous, but for now she would just watch. Noah immediately summoned the Soul Eater from the Shadow Vault to him. Soon the boy was left alone with the mountains and dangerous animals. A few hours later, the boy's eyes turned black. He heard danger. Noah quickly got into a fighting stance as several wolves approached. The first strike with the blade must be with full force to teach the beasts a lesson. They looked like ordinary wolves, but they possessed remarkable strength, and they all had pink stones on their heads. After waiting for the four beasts to pounce on him at once, the player swung his blade. The space turned red as Noah began to attack. The system announced that Soul Eater's cutting ability has been increased. Sandra was amazed that Noah could swing such a huge sword like it was a feather. The way it fit the guy's hand was different from other weapons for him. Cynthia was stunned when she saw how her ward wielded the blade. What he did was called the Celestial Moon Strike. The result of such an attack was a single wolf corpse lying at the warrior's feet. Tom wanted to say something, but saw what was happening on the screen and suddenly fell silent. Noah was confronted by more terrifying opponents than before. The wolves were now larger in size, casting lightning bolts and had horns on their heads. Sandra also noticed that elite units had already appeared. Everything was happening too quickly. Several of the most dangerous monsters rushed forward with loud barks, and Noah raised his blade in front of him. Tom asked where Noah learned martial arts, but Sandra knew that her friend had never played sports. She exclaimed what would have happened if they had ended up in the Colosseum, since Noah masterfully wielded the sword as if it were a scythe. After this, a viewer sent a donation, indicating that he would be happy to hear the training method at the Colosseum. Noah grabbed the Soul Eater, successfully striking at the elite squad. He swung and thrust the sharp blade into the head of one of the wolves. Cynthia clenched her fist, watching the intern with admiration, and smiled. Noah wasn't just great, the sword's ability was improving with each passing second. When the detachment was finished, the guide turned sharply towards the mountains. Something was approaching. Noah quickly assumed a defensive stance. Something unimaginable appeared in front of the guy. A huge wolf's face resembled some kind of strange ghost. It was the essence of the Silver Wolf leader. He growled and snapped his teeth, almost hitting Noah. A leader has appeared, and thanks to its speed and size, it is a real weapon of destruction. Noah blocked the blow, but the huge monster continued to push him away. The guy tensed up and ran closer and grabbed the monster's teeth, which were almost as tall as him. The monster's mouth opened, and Noah quickly jumped back, grabbing the sword. It was necessary to urgently decide how to deal with this monster. After all, the wolf is definitely much stronger than even that elite leader. But this meant nothing to Noah, and he attacked the monster with all his might with his sword. The wolf's soul was consumed, and the blade's ability was enhanced as the wolf's blood was sprinkled on it. A few seconds later, the huge body collapsed next to Noah. Cynthia clapped her hands. She expected this from the best agent in the Bureau. The mentor admitted that she wanted to intervene because the leader's essence is incredibly strong. It is very difficult to cope with. While the couple were talking, Sandra remembered that the mission was not so difficult, B rank. Tom suggested that the difficulty depends on the player's own actions. For some reason, the location did not close, despite the fact that the leader's essence was destroyed. Cynthia said that this was a unique phenomenon. She headed further into the forest and called Noah to follow her. She needed to understand what the reason was. The couple didn't have to walk for long. After a while, they suddenly stopped in bewilderment. In a forest clearing, in a nest, lay a huge egg, which by all appearances resembled a bird's egg. At that very second, the thick shell began to crack, and the egg began to move. Cynthia urged them to be careful, because they didn't know whose cub it was. And at that moment, a bright light was shining through the cracks. To everyone's surprise, when the top of the shell fell, a wolf cub was staring down at everyone present. The puppy emerged from the egg and began running around the people, causing a real shock among the stream's viewers. The mentor realized that this was definitely not the norm, because the otherworldly creature was too friendly towards people. Noah asked if he should be killed, but the girl doubted it, even though it was standard protocol, and still decided in such an unusual situation to take the puppy to the lab and have it examined. The boy nodded and grabbed the baby by the scruff of the neck, just as his parents would have done. The puppy barked incomprehensibly and then began to snort. Cynthia, noticing that the world was beginning to collapse, called for him to get away. The couple went to the HQ Measurement Control Bureau, where the staff placed the baby on a couch. They had never encountered anything like it before, as research had shown that this creature was not an otherworldly life form. One could only assume that the summoned entity was created using some kind of ability. The girl shrugged, saying that none of them had such an ability. Scientists speculated that the call might have come from the reverse planet, not from Noah and Cynthia. The baby wagged his tail when the employee said he couldn't keep the puppy because he had an owner assigned to him, and according to the rules, it's not allowed to provide protection to someone else's creature. The system announced that Lightning Wolf has been registered as a pet. At that moment, an emergency server maintenance was announced to download an update, and players were advised to log out as quickly as possible and find a safe zone. Sandra was surprised because Noah had just received a pet that didn't exist in the system. And then suddenly, an update was announced. The viewer immediately donated a small amount, delighted that the pet had been implemented into the system faster than the patch indicated. Sandra was proud of her friend. It turns out the game will be updated urgently just because Noah got a pet. He and Tom finished the broadcast and said goodbye to the viewers before doing so. The TV that was showing the stream was immediately turned off. The video was watched in the US conference hall on Planet Earth HQ. The blonde at the table dropped her head into her hands, admitting that Noah had discovered a fully adaptive artificial intelligence that even the organization didn't know about. Reverse Planet's lead developer, Sophia, rubbed her forehead dejectedly, muttering that it was a system update the developers weren't aware of. Her interlocutor didn't look pleased either. He reminded her that there was only one person who could do this, Isaac. The former lead developer of Reverse Planet, a renowned genius despite his young age, is currently missing in action. Sophia bit her thumb, thinking that this weirdo had disappeared for a reason. The girl didn't think that Isaac would close the service to arbitrarily update the game. She asked the engineer what was wrong with Deus, and he replied that they were trying in vain to wake him up. Deus, an artificial intelligence created by Isaac to help develop the game, stopped functioning after his creator disappeared. Sophia suggested checking for unknown update files. If something like this happens again, expect serious trouble. The engineer was surprised by Sophia's belief that they could be found, since Isaac did not want this, but the girl flared up, shouting that they had to do it. She also ordered that Noah be put on the priority list and that the live feed be monitored so that immediate action could be taken if anything happened. Sophia clasped her hands, mentally cursing Isaac. No matter what he was planning, his plans would never come to fruition. The huge computer code was changing. It seemed that Deus really began to wake up. Anonymous viewer 62 donated a tidy sum to celebrate the mission's completion, and for the next one, Noah will need a trusted companion. The next day, Noah met Sandra in the real world and could only think about the anonymous viewer. From both that and this side, he is given tasks related to the system, such as continuing the game and unlocking the new planet system, which means the candidate is most likely a developer closely connected to the system. The friend suggested that it could have been a gaming company employee, but the main character thought it was a coincidence. Why would a gaming company monitor an ordinary player's broadcast? He asked what news Sandra mentioned in the message, and she said that Noah had received a lucrative offer from the SSR Cup. It is the largest home tournament between players of the game, usually featuring streamers, famous influencers, or former professional players. Noah asked what they wanted from him. This question angered his friend because the guy was the center of attention and the cup had the whole coaching support. They probably thought that, given the level, it would be better to hire Noah as a coach rather than a player. So why not get involved and show off his coaching skills? It turns out that Noah needed to take on an apprentice, and if he did, Sandra would help with everything. The guy remembered the anonymous donor's advice and agreed without much enthusiasm. Sandra jumped up from the table. She was incredibly grateful to her friend because this would really help the streams. She quickly finished her cake to send her consent before Noah suddenly changed his mind. A few days later, a new broadcast began, and Sandra and Tom joyfully greeted viewers. They started today's stream with an important announcement. The main character will be participating in the SSR Cup as a coach. It's good to play the game and teach other people, but these are completely different things. I wonder what kind of coach Noah will become. Today, the guy plans to focus on raising his level, which is still low. To be precise, the player won gold in duel and fight, and Noah also had a 10-game winning streak. The objective of this game was to complete the survival mode without weapons and get more than 40 kills. Sandra sent a message to Noah saying that this task was a real jackpot. The commentators were delighted because Noah accepted the challenge. Now, they will find out if it is possible to get 40 kills without using a gun. PvP mode survival. The game was found. The first region is a military base. Noah found himself at the location. Realizing that this was the outskirts of a military base, the guy activated his special vision. It became crystal clear that there were 19 people in this area. If he wants to get 40 skills, he needs to hurry. Noah prepared to run like an Olympic runner. A few seconds later, he ran forward with inhuman speed, raising mountains of dust. During this time, he did things that were not immediately visible to the human eye. 2 opponents were immobilized by blows at once, and what's most surprising is that the guy didn't even have to stop. Tom and Sandra's mouths dropped open, and viewers echoed their emotions, pouring out their feelings in the comments. Finally, when the space was filled with the system's windows of the murders committed, Noah stopped. Having run so many miles, he made it with difficulty, running into a deserted area. In total, the player killed 18 people. He flexed his bloody fists. Sandra looked at Tom, who was almost in ecstasy from what he saw. The outskirts were completely cleared. Soon Noah came across his final target in the concrete jungle. The man sat on a pedestal, his face hidden by a hood. Without thinking twice, Noah ran up and was about to attack the player, swinging his leg high. But to his surprise, it didn't work. He only destroyed the stone, and the enemy jumped back. Viewers wrote that this is the return of the real hacker accuser. The man hunched over and assumed a fighting stance, his fingers wrapped in bandages. Noah didn't take any action yet, but looked closely at the man opposite him. Sandra and Tom noticed that he had a pumped-up physical form just like Noah. Moreover, this stranger had a pumped-up kill log of 15 skills. Noah now has 39 kills. Can he get that devilish 40? The stranger came close to his opponent, and Noah was ready to strike. He swung and struck, but to his surprise, he missed. Then the guy ran up and tried to kick his opponent in the air. But again he failed. The stranger was too fast. He nimbly ran back to the wall, breathing heavily. Out of anger at the strong opponent, the anonymous man clenched his fists and growled. Tom was delighted with the amazing clash. Both players were at the level of experienced martial artists. The stranger ran up to hit Noah. It seemed he had plenty of strength. He tried to seize the initiative and grab his opponent by the shoulder. At that moment, Noah decided it was time to stop playing these games. Then the guy hit with such force that the stranger was thrown in the opposite direction. He sat by the broken rocks and coughed harshly, then muttered that it wouldn't work with a build he wasn't used to. The man smiled, said it was fun, and offered to do it again, then slowly disappeared. Noah came closer, repeating the words of the murdered anonymous person in surprise. The game ended in solo survival mode. Tom exclaimed that Noah had finally reached 40 kills and completed the task. At that moment, a generous viewer donated a tidy sum to Noah. Sandra clapped her hands and thanked him warmly for the task. The girl even stood up and started jumping for joy, offering to level up. So that day, Noah achieved a total of 98 victories in a row and reached mastery level in all modes. This time, the stream was watched by many viewers, including a girl who was scrolling through the forum feed at the same time. She carefully read all the messages of the reverse time community, and there she saw that Noah was looking for a student. George was idly scrolling through his phone and replied that he had already applied because he was the senior. The boys were twins. Alice reproachfully noted that she should have put in a good word for her sister. George muttered something absently. Meanwhile, back at US headquarters on the ground, Sophia was typing something on her computer in her office. The girl looked at the screen in bewilderment. She had just read about the highest recorded number of murders of all time. A few days later, 5 minutes before the stream started, Noah was playing with the baby lightning wolf. The wolf cub had the ability to bite, howl, and roll over, and overall looked like an ordinary pet. Sandra was talking to a friend and told him about the selection of students. There were many applicants. She and Tom conducted the initial selection, and the girl asked Noah to look at the candidates. Tom urged Sandra to hurry. The broadcast would start soon. The girl allowed him to start as soon as she gave the signal, and Noah thought about sending the wolf cub home. He stuck out his tongue and looked devotedly at his owner, making a funny sound. Noah immediately froze, unable to take his eyes off the puppy of the most formidable wolf. Finally, it was time to start. The guy, as always, looked seriously at the system window. He had barely arrived at the location when he heard the telephone ringing. It turned out that a large-scale riot was taking place, and the Dimension Control Bureau sent everyone messages about it. A reverse planet rampage is a phenomenon that occurs when an otherworld invades a reverse planet, causing it to restrict access for entities, causing a rampage. When a rampage occurs, the invading creatures attack the land. The system has prepared a task, response to a large-scale rampage, destroy the creatures and respond to the large-scale rampage. At that moment, Cynthia ran towards the intern. She was very excited. The girl pointed behind her, exclaiming that the transport was ready and they could set off. When the couple arrived at the first location, they found the massacre having finished. There were goblins here who had apparently already been dealt with by the agents who had arrived earlier. The villains were probably pursuing the escaped townspeople. The girl knew that Noah could handle it on his own, and so she suggested that they split up. Cynthia winked at the intern and then quickly ran off to the other side of the location. Noah's eyes darkened as he peered into space, hearing distant sounds, and already knew where he would go next. Someone was running through the forest, escaping from their pursuers, tearfully begging them to leave them alone. The girl tried in vain to break away from the impudent goblins who were following her closely. Luckily, Noah was already nearby and, with the help of his scythe, immediately killed one of the monsters. When he fell to the ground, the guy pounced on the next goblin, jumping on top of him. Just as another monster was about to attack the defenseless stranger, Noah threw a scythe in its direction. The monster screeched as the sharp blade pierced its green body. Finally, all the monsters were defeated. Noah easily returned his sickle to his hands. The girl was shaking with fear. Sitting under a tree, the guy explained that he was an agent from the Bureau of Dimension Control. If the stranger went this way, she would be safe. She thanked him for saving her and ran along the path Noah had shown her. The player watched to see if the girl had gone the right way. thinking that she was the last of the victims. Just when he thought that he couldn't get rid of the enemies at this rate and that he needed to find and kill the captain as quickly as possible, heavy footsteps were heard behind Noah. The huge red-skinned goblin struck with all his might with his blade, but missed and only crushed the earth. The user, fortunately, quickly got his bearings and jumped to the side without being hit. Once, at a safe distance, Noah threw his scythe towards the monster. But he was no slouch. Roaring, the goblin deflected the enemy's weapon with his dagger. While the monster was trying to reach the man, Noah's vision caught sight of a new detail among the bushes. He thought he was mistaken, but someone's figure actually flashed behind the goblin. However, there was no time to look closely, because first it was essential to neutralize the enemy. The spectators did not expect that the invincible player would for some reason begin to defend himself, but not attack. Even Sandra and Tom didn't understand why this was happening. Tom assumed that Noah's attention was focused somewhere else, not on the enemy. Indeed, Noah was able to fend off the attacks expertly, but he couldn't focus on the battle, while the figure was still simply watching him. When the goblin struck again, it cut the links of the man's chain. The next moment he roared like an animal and pounced on Noah, and he, as if it cost him nothing, cut the monster down with one swing of his scythe. When the goblin fell, the guy was able to catch his breath and check if the stranger was in the bushes. He actually continued to stand, but did not do or say anything. Noah got tired of this performance and irritably ordered the stranger to leave. He obeyed and came out. It was a dimension invader. Although outwardly similar to a human, the creature belongs to the other world. They had different names, like demons and other people from other worlds. Sandra was shocked that they saw an invader at this stage of the game, because usually they are found closer to the end. The player's reaction did not indicate whether he was ready for the confrontation. Meanwhile, the Dimension Invader had already taken a fighting stance without coming any closer. Apparently, he wanted to fight hand to hand, and so Noah immediately threw his scythe aside. He repeated the invader's move, promising himself that he could deal with the monster. Both warriors looked at each other carefully until neither made the first attack. Noah ran first, and as he crossed the clearing, a bright light hit the boy in the eyes. This is how the invader tried to immobilize the enemy. Despite this, the guy managed to hit, but he missed because the monster had amazing reflexes. However, Noah did not lag behind. All of the invader's subsequent blows missed. Tom exclaimed enthusiastically that this battle was something special. He asked if she resembled the last one seen earlier in survival mode. There was still something about this sparring that reminded Noah of it, but he wasn't sure. The next moment, he and the invader made an identical lunge with their legs. In another world, a combat model was once created in Noah's image to kill him after the player destroyed the research center. While the guy was thinking these thoughts in his head, the monster attacked him relentlessly. But something was different. Noah managed to grab the invader right by the face. While holding him, the player pulled the opponent towards himself and then hit the back of his head on the ground. The impact was massive, and a whole web of destruction spread across the ground beneath the monster. Noah raised his other hand to swing and strike his enemy again. Someone in the other world is doing the same thing as that laboratory, but it's unclear who. Perhaps it was a League of Enterprises, or one of the invaders. But something made Noah slow down. He remembered an important detail. Even his past opponents didn't repeat his moves in PvE mode. He repeated them in PvP. While Noah was thinking, he completely immobilized his opponent, turning his face into a mess. All this meant that this someone could be involved in the game system as a whole. Could it really be that same anonymous viewer 62? Cynthia's voice was heard, and she ran up to the guy to find out how he was doing. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw who the trainee was fighting. Not only was it an invader, it also had the essence of a captain. She immediately radioed that an invader had been detected and that a cleanup team needed to be sent in, as well as to ensure that there were no more invaders in the area. The mentor praised Noah. She knew she could trust him, and the boy reciprocated her feelings. The girl said that things had also become calm in other locations. She suggested waiting for the cleanup team, and then returning to base.
The task was completed, the player's level was increased, and one ability point was earned.
Then Noah appeared before Ben, who wanted to talk about the defeated invader.
Scientists have studied the enemy's body, and it has nothing in common with the one the team has already seen. In other words, they belong to different species. Therefore, the head of the department would like to hear from Noah the details of what happened. Perhaps the guy remembered something special from this incident. The man was amazed by the words of his subordinate, who said that this creature imitated Noah. Sandra was surprised by such a reaction. Perhaps such behavior from the invader could mean something more serious than one might assume. Human history has never known a single instance of an invader imitating a human, so it's strange that they're trying to change their strategy to suit humans. It can be guessed that the warriors will not be able to stop their invasion of the Earth. The disguised entities will act in a way that benefits the reverse planet. They will sow chaos in society, which will facilitate their invasion. The League of Enterprises that Noah knew would not hesitate to cooperate with the invaders if it brought them profit. After a short, heavy silence, Ben let out a tired sigh. He thanked Noah for preventing another incident before it happened. The guy did a great job. The man pushed some kind of box towards his subordinate, saying that he was more than worthy of receiving it now. Noah carefully accepted the gift and opened it, examining the contents in surprise. A few minutes later, he left the office, deep in thought. But then Jackie, who hadn't appeared at the bureau for a long time, called out to him. The audience was also happy about her appearance. Noah asked why she was there, and it turned out that the mentor had come to congratulate the intern, because he was no longer a trainee, as he had received an official agent badge, a silver brooch. Traditionally, a senior pins a badge on a junior when the latter is promoted from trainee. Cynthia said that the mentor should do it, but since Jackie has an injured arm, her deputy will do it. So the girl took the brooch from the box and ceremoniously pinned it to the guy's jacket collar. Now that Noah has become a full-fledged agent, both of the bureau's employees congratulated him. The guy thanked them. Cynthia said that since he was now officially an agent, he now had more powers. But there is also one nuance. Now the player can go on operations alone. Moreover, you can choose tasks yourself without going through complicated procedures. So now Noah will make the transition from portal to portal on his own. Jackie was even upset that Noah could now go to class alone. Her colleague laughed that, even so, the girl got injured. She stamped her feet and screamed that this didn't happen by chance. Cynthia rolled her eyes and nodded. In any case, Jackie said that Noah didn't have to go on missions alone. He could always rely on his mentors. Jackie asked what Noah thought, whether he would take on more solo missions. Sandra told viewers that Noah still had a lot to do, so they needed to wrap up the broadcast. But before that, the organizers had an important announcement. The selection of students will soon begin, and the girl solemnly announced that she named him That's How, which caused laughter among the commentators. Tom said he heard there were a lot of people applying, and it turned out they were almost done selecting. Sandra urged fans to wait for the next broadcast, which will take place very soon. After a while, the show started. Tom and Sandra were standing on the stage and talking about the organization. The candidates stood nearby, including Alice and Fred, who had previously seen the messages on the forum. There was also a YouTuber with 100,000 subscribers, as well as aspiring streamers. Fred showed Alice the popular blue whale standing next to them. It was a trash streamer who had some bad things to say about Noah, so it's weird that he was chosen too. Perhaps it was to put it in place. But Alice didn't agree with that. It was actually Sandra's idea. She really wanted to destroy the streamer. The broadcast was about to start. Everyone was waiting. The guys greeted the viewers.
As mentioned earlier, a selection of candidates will be held today, for which everyone has gathered here in an open-air studio that can accommodate many people.
And with a lot of people waiting, Sandra announced without further ado that Noah would soon appear on stage. After a while, the guy actually came out, wearing a mask and an elegant suit, and then introduced himself to general cries of delight. Those present even blushed with embarrassment. They were so delighted at the appearance of the hero. Noah paused and thought for a moment, remembering his discussion of the selection process with Sandra. When asked what the guys might be most interested in, she replied that it was a raid in a team game.
Raid is one of the most popular PvE modes.
There's only one very powerful creature to defeat here, but since there are a lot of clever tricks there, you can't do it without a team. Noah addressed everyone. As far as people knew, he was going to choose an apprentice for himself. If someone wants to become him, they must do everything that Noah asks. If they are not sure that they can fulfill this condition, they can leave. The player will then disqualify users if they do not follow his instructions. But if players show a desire to learn, Noah guarantees that they will reach master level. The trash streamer mockingly exclaimed that the guy himself had just received the title of Master. Let him prove his skills. Noah agreed to this, then challenged 12 people to attack him at once. If at least one hit reaches the guy within 10 minutes, they win. Sandra and Tom were stunned. They hadn't agreed on this, especially for one blow. Anyone who manages to hit the player will immediately qualify. But she took a step forward, saying that without a head start it would clearly be impossible to do this. He drew a circle on the ground with his boot, declaring that he would not attack first and would not leave the circle. George raised his hand and asked if they could attack at the same time. Noah replied that it could be done with any weapon and skills. The guy's eyes were filled with darkness and he announced that they could begin. The first to accept the challenge was, of course, the trash streamer. Eager to catch Noah in a weak spot, the man decided to see how long he could hold out. A long stream of fire flew towards the guy. Noah simply tilted his head to the shoulder, dodging. An explosion occurred immediately behind him, without hitting the player. Streamer cried out in indignation. Noah dodged his fiery spear so easily. Noah stretched, stating that there wasn't much time left, so let the candidates attack simultaneously. The red-haired girl and the guy next to her exchanged tense glances. The next moment, the participants, as instructed, directed their forces together at Noah. In front of everyone was a guy in a superhero costume, his fist carrying fire. Noah concentrated, his face lit up with a bright light from the attacks. But it didn't work, and all the participants fell to the ground at once. The attacks were no match for Noah. Even close combat didn't work. Alice ran up to those who complained, urging them not to give up so early. Together with his brother, they ran forward cheerfully, while the rest remained lying on the ground. The twins teamed up and split up, deciding to attack the player from both sides. Alice was about to attack from below and George from above. Noah watched them with just a glance from under his mask. But the next moment, the guy suddenly grabbed his brother and sister by the legs. Then he simply threw them aside, which caused laughter from the commentators. As Alice and George lay unconscious on the ground, Sandra declared that time was up. It's amazing that during this time, the bronze, gold, and silver players didn't even pull Noah out of the circle. Noah stated that he had confirmed his abilities and asked if anyone had any objections. Everyone present immediately confirmed that it was not. Noah shrugged. It was just a testament to his skills, and he still needed to prove himself as a coach. Sandra was touched and announced that they needed to start introducing the superstar. Noah let out a disgruntled sigh, realizing that his friend meant an atomic star. The selection was in full swing. Tom asked what should be done first. Sandra announced that the first task was to demonstrate skill control without modifiers. This is a very simple exercise in which participants must hold a 15-kilogram barbell in a given body position for 3 minutes. Tom said that participants will be given a simple position that is commonly used to improve form. It is not as effective as absolute being, but it does increase endurance and strength. Sandra gave an example of how she and Tom tried it, and somehow it worked for them too. Those who are ready to take part in the test should switch their system window to visible mode. The twins asked if there would be bonuses and penalties for completing the task. Points are distributed on a scale depending on the order in which they are completed, so that those who complete the task faster will have an advantage. After the second test, the 4 people with the lowest scores will be eliminated. Hearing this, the participants gasped because as many as 4 participants would be expelled. Repeated attempts are allowed, so candidates should feel free to try to complete the test several times. However, the time limit for the task is 30 minutes when the students are actually performing it. The start was announced, and 5 minutes later, everyone was already standing with their weights. Sandra noticed that everyone was very absorbed in completing the test. One of the spectators donated money. and everyone was interested in who would go first. Noah guessed it would be twins. Sandra bet on the streamer. Spectators didn't understand why there were no provisions for those who specialize in long-range combat, as it was unfair. The girl saw that her rating was falling, and the commentators decided that she did not respect players with ranged skills. She waved her arms, shouting that she hadn't meant it that way at all, as the organizers didn't only select melee players. The second challenge will target ranged users, so players will only be eliminated after the first challenge. Sandra was still concerned about her reputation, so she tentatively asked if anyone was ready to take the test. As it turned out, the consonants were twins and a popular YouTuber. They placed the barbells on the floor and began to warm up for the new challenge. When the new task was launched, everyone had a determined expression on their faces. A minute later, the twins were ready to kill each other, each trying to persuade the other to surrender. After 2 minutes, the powerful YouTuber turned completely red from the tension. He failed, lasting 2 minutes and 50 seconds, seemingly losing his concentration for a moment. Well, while the presenters were chatting, the twins lasted for a whole 3 minutes. They were immediately congratulated, as the boys were the first candidates to successfully pass the tests. Alice and George gave a triumphant cry, pumping their fists and grinning widely. The YouTuber wasn't ready to give up so easily, so he asked if he could try again. His second attempt was announced, and the man immediately lifted the barbell. The trash streamer saw that there wasn't much room left, and if he didn't make it into the top 6, he would likely end up in the relegation candidates. It would be a shame not to even make it into the top 4 after all the clickbait videos. Sandra congratulated the 4 participants who had made it through, and the streamer saw that everyone was focused on them. He waited until the girl asked who wanted to go next. She glanced at the streamer, who had just approached the large pole. The man raised his hand, declaring his participation, and Sandra asked him to switch his system window to visible mode and come up on stage. Noah just turned his attention to the streamer, waiting for him to get up. Now, the test began. The participant took hold of the barbell handle. A blue glow appeared around his figure, and the streamer began to rise to his feet, telling himself he could handle it. Blue Whale lasted 2 minutes on his first try. Noah continued to look at the man intently without looking away. When Sandra announced that 3 minutes had passed, the man threw the barbell on the ground. The girl congratulated him and invited him to join the other participants. But then Noah called for him to wait, and he himself went to the streamer asking what he was doing. He asked if the man thought no one would notice the use of a modifier. Viewers did not believe this, since there was no information about the modifier in the system window for users. Sandra asked Noah, puzzled, why he thought Blue Whale was a cheater. From the moment the man began to lift until the moment he picked up the barbell, changes appeared in his system as a modifier. Noah noticed that his body was moving differently than in real time. Sandra quietly asked her friend if she was sure, otherwise they would be in serious trouble. But he was adamant. Noah asked to see his real system window instead of this fake one, but the streamer smiled, not admitting the deception. Noah said that if he was wrong, he would apologize and stop streaming, or the guy could take all his earnings. The man grinned when he was asked to set up his modifier system, but he had to agree. Scratching the back of his head, Blue Whale mumbled that there was a bug, but Noah asked him not to continue because he was disqualified. The man was beside himself with rage, not knowing how to justify himself. He eventually swore and personally left the stream. Sandra tried to distract the audience and participants by suggesting that they continue, and that's how the selection continued after the chaos. As everyone expected, the second task was within the capabilities of the long-range fighters, and they took first place in the tournament table. Those who didn't make it bowed, assuring that they would watch and root for Noah. The organizers announced that they were finishing up the individual tasks. First, there would be a 4-on-4 fight. Then the winning team would split up and they would have to fight a 2-on-2 duel. Now there were teams A and B. The participants were divided according to the points in the tournament table. The strength of the teams was balanced. One of the viewers sent a donation asking what the task would be. Sandra announced the first team assignment as part of the Noah Apprentice selection. The team that defeats the most bots that spawn every minute will win. Each team has 2 chances, and the higher result will be recorded as the final result. Participants can use any skills and builds. The modifier will be retained at 60%. The test has begun, and several bots have appeared on the location. As a result of the first round, Team A defeated 10 bots, Team B defeated 8. Team A was leading by a small margin, with the ranged team having the advantage. The long-range ones can shoot down opponents one after another from a distance. Melee players can't clear enemies quickly. They have to deal with crowds and are more likely to get surrounded. The contestants were worried they wouldn't have a chance to break away in the second round, so George suggested asking Noah for advice. The YouTuber agreed, as it would also be a good opportunity for the player if his advice helped and demonstrated his teaching skills. Alice ran up to the judges. Sandra admitted that it was great, but not entirely fair. The girl announced that she and Tom would support Team A. Tom asked if it was a good idea for each team to have its own personal trainer. Noah was okay with it, if the team was okay with it. The Rangers discussed whether they could ask Noah to be their coach, but since he is also a closer, then Sandra should coach them. The guys confirmed that the second team would likely not improve their skills in 30 minutes. After the participants agreed, Sandra announced that the test would continue 30 minutes after the coaching session. Noah explained that to effectively combat bots, it is necessary to understand their behavior patterns. Unlike humans, robots are not afraid of pain. If they believe that the damage they can inflict on an enemy is greater than what they can inflict on themselves, they will lower their defenses and go on the offensive without hesitation. If candidates manage to catch this moment and get ahead of them, then it will be possible to predict the actions of the iron. The YouTuber spoke the last words, inspired by his mentor's lesson. Then, after the announcement, Noah suggested staging the match. He announced that participants could now imagine him as a mid-level bot and start attacking. The player had completely changed, and the candidates noted that everything looked quite realistic, even though it was a staged battle. The YouTuber was the first to attack, rushing at Noah with a blade. In response, the guy grabbed the sharp blade with his bare hands without even flinching. He then simply lunged with his right leg, knocking the YouTuber out. He could only grit his teeth and obey his fate, flying to the side. The man fell painfully onto his back on the hard ground, letting out a cry of pain. Alice and George agreed to attack at the same time. The guy wanted to be on the left. They ran together towards Noah, who patiently waited for the candidates to approach. One of the fighters on their team created beautiful stones in her palms, which she planned to hit Noah with, but was afraid of missing. At this time, Alice realized with horror that her attack was met by her mentor's limb, and George received a hard punch under the jaw. In the end, the twins were left lying on the ground, just like the previous participant. Then Noah extended his hand, offering to learn to attack together first. The other team, by the way, was watching the coach of the other team at that time. The judges urged against peeking, as this tactic only works for the other team, the close combat fighters. Sandra suggested we practice and check the construction. 15 minutes later, the long-distance team was ready to give it their all. Team B also prepared. Several bots appeared on the battlefield. The fight began. Team A rushed to attack together, as Noah had taught them. Alice struck first, remembering her teacher's instructions. Noah said that you always need to be ready for contracts, but the girl avoided it. When the bot hit, she immediately attacked him again with her fists. The YouTuber also remembered all the instructions and wielded the blade perfectly. The last participant, who could generate stones, stood hesitantly to the side. The streamer remembered Noah explaining that the team's coordination was her responsibility, the only one with a long range. If she is afraid to use skills for fear of hitting her comrades, she will never get the opportunity to attack successfully. Meanwhile, the YouTuber was distracted when he felt a bot appear behind him. The streamer saw this and screamed, drawing attention to herself. She used the ice drill command and attacked the enemy with sharp ice. Shouting that she would cover, she urged the others to fight and immediately received approval from her comrades. The judges were delighted with the incredible speed of this team. Finally, when the end of the test was announced, George had just defeated the bot. In total, Team B defeated 14 bots. Nobody expected them to increase their score that much. Noah proved that he is a capable mentor. Now it was Team A's turn to try hard, Sandra encouraged them. But it turned out that the second time Team A defeated only 12 bots. Team A had the best result with 12 bots. while Team B had 14. And this means that Team B wins. After these words, the guys were overjoyed because they did it. The opposing team was still upset. They were confident that they would win. One of the participants thought about it. He was sure that Noah would help them improve their skills too. So the guy ran up to Noah, asking him to give him a couple of tips before he left.